Wait, hold on, here.
Oh, we got all sorts of feedback.
Huh, it's echoing.
Okay, so I can call this meeting to order now. And this is the meeting of a November, I'm looking it up, 9th. Thank you. Oh, yes. Oh, I'm not loud enough. I never feel that angry. Okay, so if we can have a roll call,
Sure.
establish a quorum.
Commissioner Walton,
Here.
Commissioner Rana, Commissioner Woodson, Chair Amadeo,
Here.
Commissioner St. John,
Here.
Commissioner Herr, Commissioner Jacobson.
Here.
You have quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. If you would all rise and join me in a moment of silence and the pledge of allegiance, please. Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to make a very brief comment. I hope you don't mind, but I have been corrected numerous times. There is no comma where we say one nation under God. It's one nation under God. It's run together. And I notice everybody says it the same way, but it would be nice to practice saying it without the comma.
You're right. There's no comma, no pause.
No pause. So I got corrected in Rotary and I've been trying to do it the right way ever since.
It's a bad habit, like, I mean.
Right. Okay, so do we have any announcements or communications from the floor? And I don't see anybody calling in. All right, then we will ask commissioners, do you have any announcements or communications that are of importance and not on the agenda, important to the public? And I need lights if you have a comment. No. Okay. Oh, this is good. We're going to move on. Any ex parte communication that needs to be disclosed, but we don't have any quasi-judicial matters, so we can move on from that. The next item is the consent agenda for October 26, 2023, the draft action minutes. Does anybody have any corrections that they noted? Okay, I did note one issue. And where it says the motion was put to a vote, and I have to find the right item. And it said, I have to find it.
I can pull it up, Madam Chair.
Okay.
So,
Because it said five ayes and 2 abstentions, but I believe it was but I believe someone was absent. So if we can look to make sure.
Commissioner Walton was absent, I believe.
That's right, because
And
it shows on the motion before that, it was 6 with 1 absent, so you can't have then 5 and 2 commissioners abstaining. It has to be 4 and 2 commissioners abstaining.
Oh, okay, that's a good catch. Okay, so item 8A.
8A.
Item 8A, October 26 minutes, should be a total of 6. not
Right.
7 commissioners.
And I don't know why this says this, but then it says the motion passes with 0 votes. And I'm not sure what that was supposed to mean.
That was just an error. We'll catch that.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll let Karen know.
All right. Thank you very much. So if we can have a motion to accept the minutes with corrections.
Also motion to accept.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner
Jacobson.
Like Victor.
Jacobson. I don't know why I do this every time. I have a mental block the moment the camera's on.
I'll second, move things along.
Okay, thank you. And we have a second by Commissioner St. John. All in favor? Oh, no, we don't do all in favor. We do a roll call.
Commissioner Walton,
Yes.
Commissioner Rana,
Yes.
Commissioner Woodson,
Yes.
Chair Amadeo,
Yes.
Commissioner St. John.
Yes.
Commissioner Herr, Commissioner Jacobson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. And just so you understand, I will never forget it again. It's now in front of me. Okay, so we're going to move on to the first item, regular item on the agenda. And that is a presentation of the draft vision and guiding principles developed by the General Plan Advisory Committee, GPAC, and review land use alternatives approach. The presentation is exempt from environmental review per section 15378 of the CEQA guidelines. And so who is doing this presentation?
Madam Chair, we actually do have one other agendized item before that about the
I did not
pre-approved
see.
ADU.
The ADU preview.
And I'm sorry, I missed it. So I guess we do that first. Why don't I see it on here?
It's like a 2-minute just informational
Okay.
update.
7A. All right, thank you.
So,
7A.
so just so you know, the staff, including myself, we really do listen to what the commission asks us to do, and we do follow up. So if you guys recall, about 18 months ago, we had Habitat for Humanity and Abode Housing come speak. And the idea from the commission was, hey, Marina, we should really try to follow what Salinas and other cities are doing to have pre-approved ADU plans. So we took that to heart. And then you guys recall Carlos came and spoke to the commission, a Marina resident who used to work for HCD. So around that same time, I got connected with Carlos. He helped us get the PLHA money. We have 620,000. So we got the funds, and then it took me a little bit of time to actually officially get the money from the state. So now we have the PLHA money. And in the meantime, we wrote an RFP to get pre-approved ADU plans. Allison and Alec interviewed several firms. And on November 21st, we're going to go to council to actually implement that program. And so we can share the city council report, but basically there'll be 3 designs for the ADU, and then there'll be 3 different elevations of those 3. So 3 times 3 is 9. There'll be 9 sets of plans. And if a customer doesn't change the plans, and as soon as they pay their fees and they give us a plot plan that shows where the ADU will go, we can literally give an ADU permit within a day. So we just wanted to thank the commission for the input. We did follow up. It's going to take, so we're going to go to council November 21st. The vendor said it's going to take about 3 or 4 months to actually draw up the plans because they have to be pretty detailed engineering and structural plans. So it probably won't officially kick off till about March-ish. But if you have any neighbors or residents who are interested in building an ADU, might behoove them to just wait a little bit, because then they won't have to go through months and months of plan check, and we can potentially get them the ADU permit within a day after they pay all their fees. So, and an added bonus is we were a little bit ahead of the power curve, but now state law changed the mandate that cities do this. And it's a program in our housing element. So this commission is actually helping us. We're actually a little bit ahead of the power curve for this. So anyways, so I'm really trying to boost up our ADU numbers. I came from Los Altos, and in 2 years I was there, we approved about 142 ADUs. We're averaging about 8 to 12 here. I'd really like to boost up those numbers. It's a really readily quick way to get affordable housing by design. We don't have rent restrictions, but just by their size, they can be more readily available for the residents and community members. So anyways, we just wanted to report that out. We're going to council November 21st. Hopefully they approve the contract. It doesn't cost the city anything because it's all out of the PLHA money. So there shouldn't be any objections, but yeah, so just wanted to give an update. That was it.
Thank you very much. I believe we have a comment from Commissioner Jacobson.
We know with our plans, the county has plans. Other cities have plans. They can't be much different. You know, since the square footage and the design are probably pretty. you know,
Yeah,
Why are we spending $620,000?
the grant is for 600,000. We're using 78,000 of that to do the ADU plans. The reason why it costs so much is we own the plans. Once the architect and the engineers draw up the plans, we physically own these plans.
Okay.
And somebody has the right through our permission to use them. And we literally can like give them to the contractor and be like, here you go, build this. So that's part of the process.
I feel a little better. I thought all 600.
And then the other 500,000 is supposed to be for our first time homebuyer program, but we don't really have a housing coordinator right now. So we're kind of waiting to, yeah, as the commission knows, there's about 625 BMR units being built in the next 8 to 10 years with the big 3 projects. So we're trying to get the BMR thing off the ground and then hopefully be able to hire a housing coordinator and then throw this in additional tasks. So.
Okay, Commissioner Woodson.
Just call me Mr. Jacobson, all of us. So,
Oh, it is.
quick question on, is there a sunset on the current funding, on that funding, so that we have to have the coordinator in place and spend that money by a certain period?
I believe I have to use the PLHA money by 2026-ish or so. I'd have to double
So
check.
they
this.
give us 3 or 4 years to use. it.
Yeah,
Okay.
but we gotta get it started. So it's,
I
yeah,
would hope that we wouldn't wait that long, but it's better
Yeah.
than by next June 30th, for
yeah,
example.
yes.
Okay, so thank you very much. We do have another question. I didn't see your light. This was in the way.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you already answered my question, but do you have any samples for us to look at? Or you've got to go and get the architects to actually.
Yeah, they're gonna
Yeah,
draw
that's what I
it, but you can go to the Seaside website. And Selena's staff were actually very helpful. We basically took their RFP and plagiarized like 90% of it, and they gave us everything in Word. And so you can go to the Selena's webpage too, so for a sample. So
Okay, but you don't have one to show us now.
I don't have one today to show you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will now move on to the Planning Commission to receive a presentation from the city's general plan update. GP 2045. Is that the one we're doing? Or am I looking at the minutes? No, this is correct. Okay, so if we can have, and who do we have speaking to us tonight?
So we have Matt Remy. He is the principal planner
principal,
from
okay.
and CEO of Remy and Associates. So we're going to be talking about the existing conditions report and the draft vision and guiding principles. So
Very good. So I will turn it over to you, Mr. Remy.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all. I know I saw many of you in January virtually when we did the kickoff for the general plan. So again, I'm Matt Ramey with Ramey Associates. We have a great general plan team who's here to supporting me in this process, both internally to my company as well as several other consulting firms who provide expertise in economic development, environmental review, and transportation. But we're here tonight to give you an update on where we are with the general plan and get some feedback from you on the process that we've been going through so far. So what we'd like to do is provide a presentation that has an update on the existing conditions reports that the team has prepared, an overview of the community engagement activities that have been completed to date, We want to review and receive feedback on the draft vision and guiding principles. And then we are in the phase of alternatives. And so we have done the beginning work of the alternatives to the general plan, particularly focused on land use. And so we'd like to review that process with you, some of our thinking, and show you where we are and just get some feedback on that. So, ultimately at the end, we can have a discussion. I can answer any questions, but we'd love your thoughts and ideas on the vision and guiding principles, as well as the approach to land use. This is the- Oh, got it. Scroll down. Okay. So let me start just with a project update of the general plan. And starting out with, just for all of you and for those who are maybe watching at home, with this broad question of what is a general plan. The general plan is a long-term policy document that guides each city's future actions. It is something that is required by state law, and it really establishes the city's direction for the next 20 or so years. It's a really, really unique opportunity for the community to come together to develop its shared vision for the future. This is something that happens every 15 or 20 years. And again, it's a pretty special time because as opposed to spending our time thinking about, not in a bad way, but ADUs and plans, which are really important, we get to actually step back and think about where's the city now and where is it going in the future. And it's a time for the community to come together and have this conversation. So they're really exciting projects. They can be long, there's a lot of detail, but it's really important that we think and we be able to step back and look ahead, which is very difficult for most people to do. So the general plans are updated approximately every 15 to 20 years, and the last time the general plan was comprehensively updated was in 2000, so 23 years ago. There was a partial update in 2011. The general plan, again, is important because it is trying to preserve the strengths and the things that you all love about the community, as well as to address these topics of concern, of issues that either you have now that you're trying to address, or issues that you maybe see coming and happening in the future. The process is that we have set in place is a 6-step process. It starts with discovery. We then go into the visioning and discovery's existing conditions and kind of getting up to speed on all of the information. There's then visioning, which is developing the vision. We then create alternatives, primarily land use, but also looking at policy alternatives for various topics. We then create the broad policy framework for what the plan is going to have, the broad goals and policies. We craft the general plan, and then we go through review and adoption. Also included in this project is an environmental impact report, as well as the update to the city's zoning code. And throughout all of this is community engagement. It's extremely important. This is your community. It's the residents' community. It's not my community. And so a lot of our time is spent listening to and working with community members to help to generate ideas and help develop the plan. The project started in January 2023, as you all know, because we had that joint city council and planning commission meeting. And we are moving forward actually to try and get at least a draft of the plan by December of 2024. We are, I'm happy to say, moving actually pretty quickly on this project. And it's been great working with the community and with staff and planning commission and city council so far, because we have actually been moving along quite quickly. Especially compared to other communities that take 5 to 7 years to do a plan like this. Some of the key milestones that we have had so far in the process: we have completed existing conditions reports, we've initiated the General Plan Advisory Committee, and we've met with the General Plan Advisory Committee 4 times now, General Plan Advisory Committee, or GPAC. We've had 3 public workshops. We completed an online survey or feedback form with 600+ responses. We have the draft vision and guiding principles, which you'll see tonight, and we've started the alternatives process. And again, this is pretty much in 9-10 months, so we've gone pretty quickly on the process. The existing conditions reports are really a time for our team to look at all of the data and all of the information that we are going to need for the general plan, the EIR, and the zoning code. They are a series of technical reports. They are 8 separate technical documents that were prepared actually as PowerPoint slides that are very detailed, and they serve as baseline information for all of the work that we are doing. They do not cover every single topic. They do not have, opinions of the community members in it. It really is a factual, data-driven process. And they provide a snapshot of where the community has been and where the community is now. And all of these documents are available on the project website. We don't have the time and the focus right now to go through every single existing conditions report, but I want to give you a high level overview of just what they are. So we have the land use and community design report, which focuses on, as the name says, land use, the built environment, and all aspects related to that. So the types of land uses, the regulatory setting for general plan and zoning, the approved plans, and then some analysis of the overall character of the community and the city's different neighborhoods, districts, and corridors. The second document is the Parks, Open Space, Trails, and Public Facilities report. And again, as the name says, this really focuses on a documentation of the parks and the open spaces within the city. The mobility report covers networks for streets, transit, bikes, and pedestrians, as well as focusing on transportation safety. And this is sort of the physical infrastructure that ties all of the land uses together. There is an environmental justice and health report, which is quite detailed, and this has covers the state law for including an environmental justice element within the city's general plan. Environmental justice is a term to refer to areas that have a combination of lower incomes relative to the region or the state, as well as a disproportionate pollution burden. And in late September, we had a community workshop to talk in detail about environmental justice and this report. If this is something you're interested in, I encourage you to go back and watch that presentation, about a 45-minute presentation on all of the details. The next report is on demographics and market assessment. It's really benchmarking the characteristics of the community, not from a physical standpoint, but from a socioeconomic, a social and economic standpoint, including where the overall market is right now. The safety and air quality element is extremely important because it looks at topics related to keeping the residents in the community safe. And it addresses things like fire, sea level rise, flooding, earthquakes, and air quality and other types of impacts that can really affect the quality of life in the community. Infrastructure and utilities is focused on the actual physical infrastructure besides transportation that helps the city overall. And one of the major topics that is addressed in that report is the availability of water, which is quite tricky in the city of Marina. And the last one is on natural conservation and habitat, and that's looking overall at the natural environment, including habitat and biological resources. And again, this topic, as you'll see later, is a pretty important topic given some of the species that are located within the city, including the Sanguilia. As I mentioned, community outreach and engagement is something that happens throughout the entire process, and it is something that we have and will continue to spend quite a bit of our time on the project on. In the spring, we created a community engagement plan. This was presented to the city council. There are multiple goals for the plan, including inspiring the community to share their ideas about the city's future and really help guide the city's future. We want to offer multiple ways for people to participate in the process. Not everyone likes to come to a workshop or a general plan advisory committee meeting, so we try to have lots of different ways for people to engage. We want to target groups who are not traditionally involved in the process, and we have spent quite a bit of time trying to target groups who have whose voice has not necessarily been represented. We can go into a little bit more detail on that later. And then ultimately, we want to empower people. We want to give people the information and the knowledge so that they can help guide this plan, but more importantly, so they understand what is in the plan and how the city works, so they can help guide the city over the next 10 to 20 years as the plan is being implemented. In the outreach plan, we've identified a wide variety of activities, and I will focus on some of these in the next slides. We created a project fact sheet at the beginning of the project to provide information on what is a general plan and how to get engaged in the process. And this is something that's been handed out to hundreds and hundreds of people. I believe it's available in English and Spanish and Korean. Thank you. And Korean. Yes, because you helped, I think you helped to translate it. Yes. And so we have a project website, and the project website has all of the information about the project. It has past documents, it has information on general plans, why we're doing the general plan, and all of the meeting notes and summaries and documents that we have. So this is really the source for everything that we have related to the project, and we are continually updating it as we develop more information and have more meetings. So this is the go-to source. It's marina2045.org. One of the challenging aspects is to get people to engage in the process. It's a little difficult when you kind of walk up to someone in the city who doesn't really think about planning and you're like, hey, come and join a general plan process. They're like, yeah, whatever. So, we spend a lot of time trying to tell people that the process is happening, because we don't want to be in the position at the very end where people say, I never heard about this. And we can't say that we did our best to reach out to people. So we spend a lot of time at the beginning and up to this phase, and we continuing to do that to let people know that this process is happening. We've sent postcards to 12,000 addresses with Marina zip codes. We have done multiple email blasts to a database of over 1,500 email addresses. We've had announcements at Planning Commission and City Council meetings, ads in the local newspaper. We have the project website. We do posts on Instagram and Nextdoor. We distribute versions of the postcard, the workshop flyers and postcards, and then all of the printed materials are available in Spanish and Korean. And the workshops also have simultaneous interpretation in Spanish and Korean. We have a general plan advisory committee, which is an 11-member committee who really helps us guide the process. And I know some of you have participated and come to those meetings. They are, again, they are our sounding board. They help us to formulate ideas and test the ideas before it goes out to the broader public. They're incredibly important. We've had 4 meetings to date. Our next one is next month. We have 10 or maybe even 12 scheduled. And the GPAC, I will tell you, this GPAC has been great. It is relatively small, much smaller than actually other groups and other communities that we work in. But the insight that we have gotten from them is really incredible. And their ability to actually talk through and think through these issues is really pretty amazing. And so I'm honored to work with them, and you all should be proud that this group is here representing the community. There is broad, diverse representation on the GPAC, and the City Council did a great job of picking members. We have gotten input on issues and opportunities. We've created, reviewed, edited, line edited the vision statement and guiding principles that you're going to see tonight. We've done some big picture vision mapping. We've done some detailed mapping with them. And again, and all of this is in 4 meetings. So it's really been incredibly effective. They're able to work really well together, and they have, to date, really given us what we need for feedback in the process. We have had multiple workshops, including the first one on what is a general plan, to help educate people on planning and the general plan. The second one was an interactive workshop just across the parking lot here, and it was in person, where it was an overview of the process and then small group discussions on issues and opportunities. And then we had an environmental justice workshop in the end of September that I mentioned previously. We also have tried to reach out to community members through pop-up workshops. These are places where we just set up a table and we tell people who don't normally participate in the process about the general plan and try and get a little bit of feedback, and we get them interested. So there's been 6 of those and about 25 to 50 touches or interactions with people at each one of those meetings, each one of those workshops, and we will continue to do those. We've done an online questionnaire on issues and opportunities to confirm the direction that we'd heard from the GPAC and through our stakeholder interviews. It was open for approximately 2 months. We had 623 total respondents. It's not statistically valid. It's not a survey, so to speak. It was an opportunity for community members to participate. And we did get pretty broad diversity from where people live in the city, as you can see in the chart on the right. And then we got a pretty good diversity of folks, both ethnically, demographically, as well as how long people had lived in the city. It's not a perfect representation of the city. However, there was pretty diverse representation. The feedback that we got through all of this process and through the issues and opportunities, the highest concerns from the community were about water supply, lack of public gathering spaces, lack of diversity of jobs, the visual appearance of the city, and the lack of influence on regional planning and decision making. There was a lot of support for preventing development beyond the urban growth boundary, balancing growth with the character of the community, creating safer streets, attracting more employers to the city, and then promoting technology and engineering jobs. So higher tech, higher paying jobs in the city. And almost 2/3, we asked about the existing vision statement and some information that we had developed, and about 2/3 of residents strongly supported the existing vision and goals in the general plan. So we presented the goals from the existing general plan and the vision, and we asked for feedback on that. And again, there was a lot of support for that direction, but there were some ideas that were identified that were missing, such as a walkable downtown, more appreciation for diversity, and more public services. There were mixed sentiments on small town feel, which was one of the phrases in the vision about whether the city was really a small town. Should it remain a small town? Is it a medium-sized town? And there were continued mixed sentiments on growth and how growth should occur in the city. Again, this is actually pretty typical of a community who is growing, a community that's growing and struggling with both the benefits and the impacts of growth. So again, the summary from the engagement work and the existing conditions that we did, so everything presented so far, we really identified a lot of strengths in the community. People who are here really love to be here, and really, which you all know, and there's a lot of reasons why. So there's a lot of strengths to the community, and diversity, geography, and proximity to the coast and natural areas, the relative affordability really came up a lot. There were clearly issues and challenges that were identified, including the tension between old and new and north and south. And I know that came up in January. The lack of affordable housing, the new development that's coming in being mostly unaffordable, the identity of the community, and the lack of a clear identity, and then the lack of a downtown, which I know Guido has been working on with the downtown, the DVP. So that was sort of a broad overview of like everything that we did in about 10 months of background work. There's a lot of work that we did, and I know I went through that pretty quickly. But all of that, besides being background information for us and for the community to read, really helped us to develop a revised, updated vision and guiding principles. This is really our first product that is part of the general plan. And we start with the vision and guiding principles because it really sets the stage for the direction of the community. So we ask people to just step back and think bigger about what, if you could describe the community in the future, what would it be? What are the characteristics? And then what are the principles that you feel the community should follow as it moves on into the next 2 decades? So really the vision and guiding principles is trying to encapsulate all of that in a very limited amount of space. But it's important because it helps us frame the land use decisions that are made. It helps us frame the policies. It really helps us frame all of that. So it's important that we get it right. And what we did in this process is we started with the existing vision statement and planning goals that are in the existing general plan. So the existing general plan has a vision statement, and that's what's highlighted on the screen here in yellow. I won't read this, but you know, as I said from the survey, there was a lot of support for this statement. There were also recommendations for improvement, and the GPAC came up with recommendations for improvement as well. The general plan also has, right after the vision, it also has 17 what the plan calls planning goals that are supposed to guide the plan. We call these guiding principles, so we are going to rename them guiding principles. The goals address many of the topics in the general plan, but there were, while they were actually still really valid, there were some concerns about how they were written. They were overlapping. Each of the goals like addressed multiple topics, so it kind of got a little bit confusing. And there's some issues and ideas that people felt like were missing from the goals from 2000, which is not surprising considering it was probably written well over 20 years ago. And so we started with that, and then we worked with the general, you know, both through the online questionnaire that I mentioned, as well as then working very specifically with the General Plan Advisory Committee to revise a draft vision statement. Revise the draft vision statement. And we did this by actually starting with, asking whether they wanted the existing vision, whether they wanted a slightly modified vision or a more modified vision. And we ended up with a more modified vision statement, which you see here. And it addresses a lot of the same topics that are in the existing vision. It's written in a slightly different way. And what we would like, I assume you all have read the vision. So we just want some high level feedback on whether you think this is going in the right direction. Likewise, we developed, I believe it's 17, although it's not 17, it's A through P, because we didn't want them numbered because that meant a priority. And so we created these draft guiding principles, and each guiding principle, as you see, has what we call a signpost, which is a phrase to identify what it is, and then a sentence or so describing what that guiding principle is. And so they're here on the screen in the next 3 slides. And we tried to cover a lot of the topics that people felt were important for the community, starting with creating a unified marina. And this came up a lot. Again, it was the community has evolved over time, and sometimes when that evolution and growth happens, people feel like the people don't know each other, and it's multiple cities, especially when you have a lot of new development and older development. And so the idea is that it should be one city, and there should be shared resources and appreciation for everyone, regardless of where they have lived, how long they've lived here, or who they are in their background. Likewise, the second one, and I'm just going to hit on a few of these overall, not every single one, but diversity was really important. So diversity was really not highlighted in the last general plan, and I think it's something that has been highlighted a lot more recently. And so having a diverse city and a city that celebrates its diversity is the second guiding principle. Then there's guiding principles for housing, for a strong economy, avoiding sprawl, so focusing development within the existing urban growth boundary, having a safe and healthy community, making the city walkable and bikeable, creating a connected network of parks and trails, protecting natural resources, making the city resilient from natural disasters and climate change, recognizing and celebrating the history of the city, particularly related to the indigenous peoples who were here before and the legacy of Fort Ord, having the city be a regional leader and a city that can help influence decisions going on within the region, rather than maybe not having as much control over those regional decisions. Again, that's something that came up, and I see head nods. Maintaining high quality public facilities and services, having effective transit, enhancing the identity of the city, and then making sure that government is responsible. During our discussion tonight, what we'd like to do is just get broad feedback from all of you on whether this is going in the right direction, whether you think the tone is right, whether there's anything here in these that shouldn't be in them, or whether there's anything that's missing. So that's the feedback that we'd like to get this evening from you. So then moving into the next part, and we can come back and show these slides for all of these, but the next part is thinking about the land use process and the land use alternatives process. And land use is really one of the most central features to a general plan. The land use designation map, which I'm sure you're all familiar with in the city, defines what is allowed on every single parcel. It really, from there, it helps define the transportation system, the economic development strategy, how people live and work in the city, the mobility system, financial capacity of the city and financial stability. Everything really follows from land use. So I'm going to go through just a little bit of background on this to bring you to where we are now, because the city is very interesting in terms of what has happened so far, physically, as well as from a policy perspective that leads us to how we think about alternatives. And we're not going to talk about what the alternatives are tonight, just leading to what we know right now. So first, two of the most important geographies with a city, one is the city limits, and then the second is the sphere of influence. City limits is the actual physical limits of the city that the city has control over. The second is the sphere of influence, and those are areas that could theoretically be annexed into the city. There are two distinct areas that are part of the sphere of influence, one north of the city and one south of the city. The red line on the map and the gray areas show what those, what the sphere of influence is in the city. As I mentioned, land use designations are really central to the general plan. They identify the use, the distribution of uses, the type of uses, and the intensity on every single parcel in the city. There's a land use diagram. The existing land use designation map is what you see here on the screen. And essentially, the land use designations must align with vision and the goals and the policies in the remainder of the plan. So there are, the existing general plan has 27 land use designations in 6 categories. We are going to be looking at these land use designations to bring them into alignment with state law. But essentially, a lot of the city, as you will hear later, is already either built or determined. And so those land use designations will generally remain in place. The process of updating the land use map is identified here, and we start with confirming the land use designations that are set. So really where there's no change that's going to happen. We then identify what we call areas of discussion. So where are there areas where we could re-envision what the land use and what the physical form of the city is? Then for each of those change areas, we will develop one or more visions or alternatives. So we'll think at a big picture, take an area, Cypress Knolls, because we all know that's an area that we're going to be discussing. We'll think about what could it be? What are the uses? What's the character? And then we'll create multiple alternatives for those based on that higher level vision, get feedback from the community, and select a preferred direction. So that's essentially the process that we do for each of those areas and then citywide. The alternatives that are developed will be developed with community input, discussed with the community, and then ultimately decided by the Planning Commission and the City Council. And then that's what will create the land use designation map. Today, we're really talking about 1 and 2 on this list here. So we're not going very far down the list. This is our kind of dipping our toes in the land use alternatives water, so to speak. When we're thinking about development, we want to think about what we know now. What are the constraints to development and what are the constraints to those land use decisions that we're making? And so I'm just going to quickly go through a series of slides. It's going to be a little bit of drinking from the fire hose, but bear with me because you're going to see where this ends up, which is the first is we have an urban growth boundary here, and that's that purple line. And essentially, through 2040, the city cannot develop north of that purple line. So the sphere of influence area on the north side of the city is north of the urban growth boundary. So that is out of discussion for this general plan because the general plan essentially goes through 2040. So that area is not for us an area that we are proposing to look at. The next is that you have a wonderful resource in the city, which is an airport. There are some drawbacks to having an airport. One of those is there's some pollution issues that you have from aircraft. The second is that there are safety zones for planes when they take off and land. And these are the safety zones, and land uses within those zones are limited. The majority of the safety zones are outside of the city right now or in the area that's already controlled by the airport or has open space, but it's just something to keep in mind that there are these airport zones and they do influence what you can build and how intense you can build. The next is you have parks, open spaces, and HMAs or habitat management areas. These are areas that there's clearly no development. They're great because you want to preserve them because you want open space in your community. But when we think about land use change, they're already decided. So these are areas that essentially are already decided. Focusing a little more deeply, there's also the Sandgilia, and we mentioned that before, which is definitely a constraint to how we think about land use in the city. This map shows some of the locations. I believe that this is just on the publicly owned parcels within the city. So we expect that there's more Sandgilia elsewhere. And so we need to think about where do we develop, how do we develop, and then what areas are conserved for Sandgilia, for the Sandgilia population. So again, it's a constraint that we need to think about. The next is coastal erosion and flooding. This doesn't have a tremendous impact. These topics don't have a tremendous impact on the city because they are pretty much outside of the city limits or right along the beach. So not much of an impact, but definitely on either side of the city. Wildfires are more of an impact. And you can see the areas here that are the high and moderate high fire severity areas, high wildfire hazard areas. And they do encroach into the city itself. So it's certainly something to think about. Then you end up with this, and this is why I moved through this quickly, you end up with this composite constraints map. And so you see all of the areas where there are constraints in the city, and a lot of the sphere of influence, probably about half of the sphere of influence, has some form of constraint or another over it. A lot of it is really the wildfire area. Then the next piece that we think about is not the constraints, kind of the natural constraints, but what do we already know about existing development in the city? And we start with sort of what's the pattern of uses right now that we expect are essentially going to remain the same moving forward. And so these are essentially established residential neighborhoods and areas of sort of large scale public uses. And so you see the blue and the yellow in this map. Don't look at the purple yet. We'll get to that in a second. So the blue and the yellow and the green are these sort of neighborhoods and public uses. Then we look at the plans that have already been developed by the city. This map shows the 6 major plan areas that you have. Some of them are master plans that are already approved. And in fact, much of the city and the open space that we see around the city is in one of those 3 master plans. So while it looks like, and you drive around the city, it looks like there's a lot of opportunity for decisions and change, a lot of these areas have been decided. And so there are a few areas which are in red, which have the opportunity for a new land use vision. The MBEST area by the airport is one of those, as well as that very large parking lot that's part of CSUMB. And that's because CSUMB was thinking about putting market rate housing there, and that sort of opened it up to being able to think about that for other uses besides public. So this is a summary of the existing specific plans and master plans. Again, we have these sort of either under construction or master plans, which are Marina Station, the Dunes, and Sea Haven. We have CSUMB master plan, which was in the bottom half of the city, as you see here, partially in the city of Marina, partially in the city of Seaside. And that's not really under the city's control because it's under state control. Then there is the UC MBEST Airport Business Park Master Plan. That's an area that we believe has some opportunity for re-envisioning. And then we have the downtown specific plan, or the downtown vitalization plan, which is an area that you all have been working on. And so it's really not an area for us to discuss with the general plan. So what we get when we put all of that together, this is sort of this sort of build up map that we're doing here, is we end up with the areas that we feel like that are outlined in red that are really those areas where we can discuss land use changes here. So just walking through them, we have the Beach Road Gateway up here. We have Cypress Knolls, which, as you know, is one of the kind of the biggest opportunities. We have the area which we're calling the 2nd Avenue Extension. We have Imjin and 3rd Avenue over here. We have the 8th Street area, and I'm losing where number 6 is because I can't really, this is the 8th Street area. I'm sorry. This is the 8th Street area. This number 5 is the CSUMB parking lot. Number 7 is the Preston Park area here. And then number 8 is the MBEST expanded area. Yeah, you can't read it either. My eyes aren't that good. Anyway, these are the areas that we feel like are the areas for land use discussion, and everything else, really, the land use is already decided. And if there's going to be infill, like with ADUs, it's just part of the character of what's there. We don't have to rethink what's there. And then there are a couple potential annexation areas. So areas within the sphere of influence that could be, or even outside of the sphere of influence that could be considered if the city wanted to do that. As I mentioned, the area sort of north of the city is north of the urban growth boundary. And then we have the former landfill site, which is recommended for a habitat management area, potentially some development if it's allowed. Then there's the East Campus Schoonover Apartments, which is controlled by the state and the state system. That's probably not an area to annex. Area C, which is outside of the sphere of influence, is a county housing element site. Again, probably not recommended because the county is already moving with this. And then you have East Garrison. Again, this is an area which is discontiguous from the rest of the city. And areas that the city annexes need to be contiguous with one another. So that's a big picture look at everything. So again, this map of the areas of discussion and then the potential annexation areas are really what we're focusing in on. And it just took a while to get to that in that sort of build up analysis. The next steps of what we're doing, we have our GPAC number 5 on December 7th. We're giving a council update on December 19th, which will be similar to this. We're planning a workshop in person on developing or reviewing land use alternatives in early winter of 2024. And then for content development, we want to finalize the vision and guiding principles, create new land use designations and apply those to the map, develop the alternatives, and then begin to work on the policies. So again, we were sort of given the charge that this project should take 2 years, which is fast for a general plan, but we're actually pretty much on target to do that. What we'd like, I know that was a lot of information, and we can go back to any of the pieces, but what we would like is have just some discussion on whether you have any questions on the engagement process and the general plan process so far for the vision and guiding principles. Do you feel that they reflect the future? If not, what should be modified? I'd like to encourage us not to wordsmith, but if the tone, you feel the tone is wrong in anything, that's certainly something we can look at. And then for the areas of discussion and that map analysis, are those areas right? Are there any other areas that should be considered or prioritized? And if you have just ideas initially about those areas and what could be there, you can certainly say them. We haven't really gotten into that with the GPAC yet, but absolutely we can hear your thoughts and your ideas. And so, Madam Chair, I turn over to you for where to start with this meaty discussion.
How about if we leave the discussion questions up that?
Great.
And we can start with engagement and find out if we have commissioners that have any specifics on the engagement portion. So, okay.
And could I ask just for you all to say your name when you start talking? My eyes aren't good enough to read everyone. And so since I don't know you all yet, I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Woodson.
For tonight's exercise, we're all going to go by Victor.
Okay, that's great.
Yes.
So you're Victor 3.
Name.
I had a feeling you were
No,
going to say that.
It'll be easy.
Please forget his name.
Victor 1, Victor 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
There we go.
Right.
Yeah,
Victoria.
there we
Victor
go.
Victoria.
There we go.
Think that was a movie.
Yes, it was.
All right. So my question on the engagement piece, going back to it, and it goes to actually the sphere of influence area in East Garrison specifically. And so I kind of can understand why East Garrison responded to the surveys, because in some ways they're lost themselves, because they're a populated area that's on the periphery of the county, and there's just all sorts of issues. So they shop in our areas and everything else. But if the recommendation is for us to not include them, and if we get down this path that we're not going to include them, do we get to a point where we just say, okay, this is the option moving forward? And the reason I bring that up is because at this point, yes, they are a sphere of influence, but then so is Seaside. And so we have all the boundary areas that really incorporate CSUMB, that incorporate all of the new development in Seaside and all the areas off of Normandy, all the way up to the golf course, and then really all the way down towards the highway and the new housing areas that exist there that are all these boundary areas. And we've seen this come up in discussions before, that affect our city. Fire department and fire response is a very easy one where we have overlapping, and we had an overlapping MOU that then disintegrated about 2 years ago. Is when that went away, when the fire department went away, as it goes away. So I guess mine is, as we can look at an engagement, is it because Sea Haven was engaged, East Garrison was engaging with us into our surveys because, oh, we're part of a contiguous community tied into next door, and that's a restriction, that's a restriction of next door going down to East Garrison. And I know the background of that because I was the one who got them added to next door for our area, but we can't get Seaside added. So how does East Garrison fit into this compared to Seaside? And if we're not going to really include East Garrison, do we really just put them outside as not even a sphere of influence, but as much as a boundary community that is impact? I mean, I understand it. I just don't understand the difference.
Yeah. So it's a good question, potentially without a good answer. So just to sort of put that out there. So first, the sphere of influence, the city of Seaside should not be within the city's sphere of influence. The sphere of influence areas are only county areas. And so just a quick terminology. So Seaside is probably, parts of Seaside are within the city's planning area, which is an area where the planning in that influences. So there is a distinction between those. Sorry to get sort of planner technical jargon on you all here. So part of East Garrison is actually within the city's sphere of influence. Part of East Garrison is not. So there is a broader question overall of, and I think part of your question is how do you take into account people who are outside of the city who are weighing in on what happens within your city, right? Did I hit part of that question? And there aren't there's no easy answer to this. The sort of the broad advice is we always expect that there are people from outside of a jurisdiction who are going to weigh in and provide input, whether it's county islands within a city. And that happens a lot in California, or whether it's people just outside of the city or advocacy organizations that are weighing in. This is something that we expect. And so it generally doesn't change the needle on the direction of the plan. I will say that even though they are outside of the city, like in East Garrison, and East Garrison is a unique situation, but even though they're outside of the city, that actually what they say and how they interact with the city, even though they may not be part of the physical boundary that is the city, the political boundary that is the city, they do, as you said, they do shop in the city, they do interact with residents, they just don't vote. And so their opinions and their ideas, I would say, are still valid. Because they do come into the city and they do interact with the city. And so their ideas about what the needs are, the uses that are needed, all of that to me feels really valid. And to me, it's not such a high percentage of the total survey that it's worth discounting any of that.
So, and I kind of, as a follow-up, and then I'll be kind of be done, is don't disagree with any of that. But I guess my point is that how did East Garrison voluntarily inject themselves into this process? Or is it because of the way that we have set up the communications and distribution of information, that because of our channels that we're using, our channels are more inherently linked to having East Garrison involved than having the other planning communities? And the reason I bring it up is that for the same reason that the East Garrison folks come into our community and we're there, it's the same overlap with the faculty, it's the student areas, but mainly let's say more the faculty areas of CSUMB off around Schoonover. And then what it will eventually be Seaside Town, or whatever they're going to eventually call it. And then off of Giggling. And then really kind of the boundary areas around Normandy and Porter, where those residents are doing the same thing. And if we are seeking and receiving good input from East Garrison, do we also reach those other communities knowing that, okay, yes, they could provide some good input also, but because of the way our channels are set up, Nextdoor being a prime example of this, that we're just not actually reaching out to them at all and we're not giving them an opportunity to engage because the channel doesn't actually open up that open up that door for us.
Yeah.
And I would like to, and I think separating it out and seeing those, I think it's great to get that input because I do think getting the outside input is really important at a high level, because these are the ones who are going to use and transition through our communities.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I agree, but Marina has had a history of special interest groups trying to influence the city for their own parochial interests. So we want to be mindful that the GPAC, this commission, other community-based groups are very grassroots, and we value your opinions because you are residents. So yes, we want potentially some outside inputs, but we want to be respectful of people like you on the commission and local community-based organizations, because those are the ones that will have the most influence on the general plan. So
Commissioner Walton.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the presentation. This was very, very thorough. I only have one question on one of the slides. You showed that, and I think I'm in the right spot for this, 95% of the respondents live or work in the city. I'm wondering if you have a breakdown of those that live and work in the city.
And this is from the community, the questionnaire.
Yes,
I was
the
losing my word.
survey. Mhm.
Yeah, there is a breakdown of that. I believe, and it's in the report. I don't have it off the top of my head. I can look quickly, maybe as the discussion is going. But that information is actually in there. I believe we did do a breakdown of that.
I can take that offline.
Okay, yeah,
Thank you.
we can certainly talk about that data. And the tool that we use actually, if we need to, allows us, and this goes to the previous question, it allows us to actually filter data. So if we're feeling like we're getting a lot of people who self-identify from outside of the city and we're worried about them influencing the results, we can actually filter that data out and then and just look at city residents. Or if we're concerned about like people who live and work in the city and what do they think, we can actually filter for that as well.
Commissioner Rana.
Hey, Commissioner Rana. My question is related to both the two headings, engagement and vision statement guiding principles. In the guiding principles, there are some mention about the economic activity and the strong and diversified economy and things like that. But I do not see anything which can really say what is the economic vision of our city. And if we have or create an economic vision, who are the stakeholders who are going to contribute to our city? Are we in discussion with some businesses, some entities from outside to bring investment into our city? If that is the case, they are to be engaged. Has that engagement process started, or are we thinking of doing it?
Great question. So the answer is, at this point, we have not created an economic vision. We're at the beginning stages. One of our team members is a firm called Economic and Planning Systems, and they do market and economic work. Part of their work is actually to help develop this economic vision in the general plan, identify markets and opportunities for the city, and to talk with different potential stakeholders. They have started that work in talking with the stakeholders, but only at the preliminary level, essentially for existing conditions to understand. So for example, they've spoken with Joby, they've spoken with the realtors, they have different realtors, they've spoken with affordable housing and other housing developers to really try and get a sense on the pulse of the economics. The next step is to begin to create that vision and then to talk further with other entities and other organizations. Part of what you're talking about is flows a little bit more from the general plan into an economic development strategic plan, which is much more focused. And that is a little bit outside of the scope of what we're doing. But the part that you mentioned earlier about talking to and visioning what can happen in the city is within our scope. And then I think that next step is the more detailed strategy about how do you get there and how can you recruit different businesses to come to the city. But you're right, before you do that, you need to have that vision. The city has a lot of strengths. And like the airport again is great. The regional location is great. The relative affordability of housing, the diversity of housing, the new housing coming in, these are all strengths that the city has. The weakness is there's not as much land for economic development and for jobs. That's probably the biggest weakness that the city has right now. So looking at these different areas of discussion, we can try and hone in on some of those economic development questions. Again, it's a to be continued, but a great important question.
Anybody else have a question before I ask my question? No lights. I'm curious as to whether or not you are engaging at the high school or college level, since we are preparing for that next generation. And I would certainly want to know if we are getting input from that next generation. What are they looking for in this community? We have college students, obviously, many CSUMB students, they come here to go to school and then they stay. Their biggest issue is, of course, the economic opportunity here. And high schoolers have a view of what they want their future to look like, even if they don't quite have the language yet and they're not sure what they're going to do in the future for their career opportunities, but they still know somewhat what they would be looking for in a community, whether they stayed here or went someplace else. So I wanted to know if you were reaching out at those two levels as part of your community engagement.
Yes and yes.
Oh, wonderful.
And let me elaborate on that a little bit. Not too long, but we had some focus groups and went to some classes in the high school. And when I had mentioned we had a workshop early on, I think it was in the spring, we did kind of vision issues and opportunities. We did that same mini workshop with a couple of different classes in the high school. And it was, we got great feedback and we're going to sort of continue to do that. We did until recently have a high school student who was on the general plan advisory committee. Unfortunately, her life got a little bit too busy and she just resigned. She was a superstar and we are going to miss her on there. And we're going to talk about replacing her on the advisory committee. The college is a little bit harder. We have actually engaged with, we had a handful of students at the environmental justice workshop. It's a little bit, it is a little bit harder because they didn't necessarily grow up in the city and some of them are just sort of coming here to go to school. So their perspective is a little bit different. But yeah, we have engaged as well. I think honestly, a little bit less so with the college or in a different way, I would say.
Okay. And then again, focusing in on that economic development, when we're doing our downtown vitalization plan. And so when you do the general plan, are you looking to very specific areas? Obviously, the airport is a specific area, but also our downtown and what kind of development can occur there under the specific plan that would help build the local economy.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Guido jump in a little bit on this, but the downtown vitalization plan is a document that is, as we like to say, it's sort of cooked, right? I mean, it's already done, but it's absolutely something that when we think about economic development strategies, transportation strategies, public facilities, opportunities for downtown, we're not just going to ignore that area. So we are going to integrate that in. And some of what we may do and some of what we may find is looking at the current economic environment now through the conversations, and that may lead to some recommended changes in that plan. It's not our intent to go and try and change that plan, but it is our intent to make sure that the vision that we develop in the general plan is implementable, and so that may require changes to existing plans.
And then I have one other question, and I don't even know if it really fits in as part of that economic.
It's a general
discussion.
plan. Everything fits in.
Okay. At one time, we had an economic development commission, and it was eliminated. But what I just heard was that those kinds of services that a commission of citizens could provide in terms of input might be valuable, and would it be something that would be recommended in the general plan?
I'm gonna let you start with this one.
The Economic Development Commission, along with the Design Review Board, we didn't get direction from the council on that. We did get direction to restart the tree committee. So that's why that got reformed. I think, so that's that. And then in terms of their input, yeah, I mean, as Matt mentioned, this is the broad vision for the city for the next 20 some odd years. So if people have specific inputs about economic development, we'd love to hear it. We'd love to get that thought, and we can definitely have, Alice and I can have a focus group with those people. So.
And then it isn't typical that we recommend specific commissions as part of a general plan process, but you know, I was sort of joking, it's a general plan, you can talk about anything. And that is actually true. I mean, the general plan is sort of the constitution of the city. So you know, we are guided by what the community wants, what the planning commission wants, and what the council wants for what goes in the plan. As long as it's sort of generally acceptable and not illegal, we're happy to have recommendations in there.
I wasn't actually saying that, gee, okay, let's add that now. It was just wondering
No,
if
it-
that was even the
Ab-
kind of thing that would
Yeah.
be helpful in the.
It could be, it absolutely could be helpful, and it is sometimes something, so if there were an implementation action that were to create an economic development strategy, that is something that more likely comes out of that economic development strategy. However, that said, it could be that we hear recommendations through the process for different boards and commissions, and we can put that in as recommendations.
Okay, very good. Okay, are there any other? Oh, how about that? Yes. I don't know which one of you turned your light on first, but we'll go to Commissioner Herr.
Yeah, so Councilor here. Well, this is more of a comment. I mean, kind of piggyback on what Commissioner Amadeo and Commissioner Lana has mentioned about the younger generation. Because in one of the surveys that I've seen in the past related to city planning, I think Marina is turning more into an aging city. Because I mean, obviously, you know, Monterey Khmer area is known for, you know, being a retirement town. And even in that survey, in terms of demography, you know, there was more older population, aging population locating in Marina compared to the younger generation. And what Nancy and Lana has mentioned, you know, in terms of the economic factor, even though we have younger generation CSUMB in terms of housing or economic opportunities, is very limited. But looking at it from long term, even though we have this grandiose, you know, wonderful general plan, you know, as people age, we will all disappear at a certain point. And if it is not filled in by younger generation, the city cannot sustain for long-term goal. So when we do these studies on economy, you know, diversified economy, we could also take into consideration. I mean, this area is known for tourism industry dominantly, but what other industry? I mean, and Joby Aviation came in, but that's limited to science and, you know, engineering field, which is, you know, limited to, you know, particular population, younger population, you know, it'd be higher than. So it's something that we can take into consideration in terms of what other economic, you know, opportunities can the city provide that we can still retain those, you know, CSUMB or even, you know, Naval Postgraduate School or DLI. You can, you know, once, you know, the military people separate from their service, you know, what will trigger them to come back and sustain the population here? It's something that we can think about. So that's one point that I want to make. And another principle, enhance city identity. And I think when you were collecting data, I think I made this comment that one of the identities that Marina can stand out compared to Monterey or Camel is the diversity, because this city compared to other two cities can stand out. But beside the diversity, I mean, I'm talking based on what's written here. What makes Marina unique? That it's not just another Monterey or another PZ, but that really makes people want to come back to Marina. So I think, I mean, this is an ongoing question, but it's something that, I mean, because if we are one of the towns, okay, Marina, like, it's like Monterey, or it's like Camel, but, for long-term sustainability, there could be something that unique that we can make Marina stand out, that sticks into people's psyche. So I think that's something that all of us can think about.
I think you're right. I mean, those are incredibly astute comments. Yeah, the city is aging, and communities need to think about how to attract people, and attracting people and getting people to come back. It's not just about jobs, and this is just to kind of add on to that. It's also about the type of environment that you have here. Younger generations want a certain type of built environment to live in. And so that's part of it. They want vibrancy, they want places to walk. And so those are important things. And those are also kind of begins to answer that second question about what can help differentiate. What are those differentiators from Marina compared to other communities? And I think, yes, it's diversity. And I think continuing to ask that question, who are we as a city? And what makes us special and unique, and why will people want to be here, either to live here or to locate jobs here or to locate businesses here, is really an important question. And that's at the heart of the general plan.
Okay, Commissioner St. John.
Thank you, Chair. I want to add just a little bit of thoughts on land use designation. Some 8 or 9, maybe 10 months ago, I attended a planning commissioner's academy, yes, in Southern California. And one of the inputs that I got from that academy was that smaller cities like Marina had a big bind. They were between a rock and a hard place because they had run out of land and they couldn't solve housing problems or economy or growth or anything because they were out of land and they had no solution to that issue. But there was a solution to the issue, and their general plan didn't allow it or didn't address it. And the solution was to go up. And Marina in 2045 will probably be pretty much out of land, maybe even before then. And so maybe the next general plan, the 2045 to 2065, might solve the land use problem by now allowing higher rise buildings. But is it maybe better or an opportunity now to get high rise into our general plan as a solution for limited land availability? To look at what areas that we have, and is any of those areas suitable for high rise? And high rise can be 10 stories or 20 or 70, depending upon what what the economic situation is for developers. But anyway, I just wanted to explore whether or not high rise in this general plan was appropriate.
So, as staff, we're always balancing, good urban planning does encourage vertical development with potential legal risks to the CEQA document and being challenged. So I like the idea. I don't know if the community is really there in terms of going to a Brooklyn or Manhattan 70 stories. I would point out that this commission and the council just reviewed the draft downtown plan, which will have another 3,000 more housing units, and there is significant height increases in the downtown. I feel like that's a little bit of a compromise between what you're saying and going to 70 stories. And the draft downtown plan also anticipates another 1.3 million square feet of new commercial and office space. To your point too, also SB 9 does allow 4 housing units per single family parcel. There have been some communities in the country who've abolished single family zoning, and they've gone to by right triplexes, fourplexes. That's a possibility. I don't know if the council is in that same alignment, but to your point, there's only so much land available. So yeah, so where is that middle point between going to Brooklyn, Manhattan levels and what's acceptable for this community? Maybe we can look towards the draft downtown as guidance. So what's your friend?
Well, I was being a little super farsighted in throwing out a 70-story building. Yeah, we could cut that in half.
That's still high.
That's still high for Marina.
Take
That-
off
that's
a
right.
zero.
That's still high, but if somebody built it, it would be full. Okay, it would fill up. It would not be vacant. And that is a economic engine. Okay, we have one of the most beautiful bays in the Pacific Coast, a big expanse called Monterey Bay. And it doesn't take very many stories to be able to see the whole bay. Only a few, but more than currently permitted in the city of Marina. We don't have a coastline that is overutilized at all. It is very underutilized. It requires an effort to get to the water. But and that's effort is even to see the water. Okay. But if we had 10 and 15 and even 30 or 35-story multi-use structures, then the 1,000 people that were lucky enough to be in those would be quite privileged. Anyway, my thoughts.
Can I just say, I want to commend you for thinking long term, because that's really, again, it's really hard to think way beyond and to think that there might be a different kind of community here than you have right now. And again, that's a challenge. And it's very rare that in any kind of meeting that I've ever done in my 25 years of planning, someone has said they want a 70-story building. So again, you're very unique in that way. Now, back to in all seriousness, I think there are two questions. There are a couple questions with this. So one is, is it acceptable and does it work with the community? And sometimes a high rise in the middle of low density essentially becomes like a vertical cul-de-sac, right? And and so that's an important question. I think the other one is what can the economy support and what can the market support in terms of building it? And I think that's something we can look at in a little bit more detail, which is what are the economics of even building a 4, 5, or 6-story building in the city? Is the challenge zoning? Is that what's stopping it from happening? Or is the issue that construction costs are high, the parking ratios are high, and therefore it's a very expensive building to build and it doesn't pencil out? So those are some questions that we can actually ask and begin to answer that question, regardless of, and then with construction types, there's different breaks in construction types. You don't see a lot of 9 and 10-story buildings. There's a reason for that. You see 5 to 6 story, and then you see a bump to 12-story. And that's because of construction types and the cost of that. So, we can look at that, and that's what the economists can help us even just do some sort of pencil pro formas to help us understand, can you build a 12 to 15-story building here? And what would it take to do that? And would anyone do that with the market?
Commissioner Jacobson.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I looked first.
As you were going through the general plan and the process, my mind kept going back to the process that we went through for the downtown revitalization plan. And, one's kind of pretty much done, and this is an overlay to that. And I was a little concerned that there would be inconsistencies between the two that may cause us issues in 30 years. I went through the downtown plan, and just shortage of, I'm going to follow it through as your report goes through. But your principles and the plan goals of the downtown plan are in sync. Now, I don't know if that happened because you referred to them, or it just happened because the community had so much involvement in both processes. So therefore, their vision and their goals were identical, or almost identical. So I wanted to commend you on that, and also wanted to say, I don't know how the process works. As you don't want to look back, you want to look forward. But these two plans are both futuristic and both out. I think, in fact, the downtown plan will outlast the general plan because it's going to take longer to develop. So I just want to make sure as we go forward that somebody is kind of keeping track of those two things. Right now, you're right on. But in the future, who knows?
Yeah. First, thank you. I just kind of want to go back to actually one of these maps here. Let's see if I can. Oh, I went way back. And I think this is really important because as I get to it, this map finally got to it. This map is really important because a lot of these areas are already decided. And so the job of the general plan is not going to be to reinvent what happens in these areas. The job of the general plan is going to be to incorporate and make them consistent. And there are different ways to do that. Like Marina Station. Marina Station is an approved development project. The land uses are decided, the entitlements are identified, right? So that's already happened, and we're not going to change that in the general plan. Our job is to make it consistent. And it's the same thing with the DVP. The DVP is not a development plan. It is a specific plan that requires individual property owners to make decisions later on. So there is a little bit more integration that has to happen with that. But all of these areas will be identified likely in some way as they are and as these boundaries are in the general plan. And our job is to be consistent and then to refer to these other plans since they are approved. So that will happen.
Thank you.
Commissioner Woodson.
Thanks. Before we go back, while I'm talking, can you also go back to the vision statement slide? Since you're almost there. Well, we were almost there. But something that we're talking about intent, and we're talking about context. And one of the things that I'm thinking about, and it's it's 33 years, it's not 30 years, so it's an off cycle. 33 years ago, the plan for this community was absolutely built around having 25,000 soldiers and dependents still living here. The 20-year general plan for that base, because I actually was involved with it in 92, still had that there. Even though they were slotted for closure, there was still an expectation that they were going to try to get off of BRAC until basically that was like, nope, we are cutting the string. You're not going away. And this happened all over the country. So when I look at 30 years for us, there was literally 30 years ago, right now, there was an expectation across this entire peninsula that there's no way Fort Ord can shut down and everybody's going to be able to leave by the summer of 1994. And then the school district lost half of its population in a summer. The population of the peninsula lost 27,000 people in a summer because nobody understood logistics like Department of Defense, that they could bring in 50 moving vans a day and move families out of here. Nobody understood how fast they could empty out this post. So contextually, it's not a 20 or 25 year thing that we're looking at here. It was literally 30 years ago. This entire community was in a wholly different place because it was extremely reliant on the military for everything. And Pebble Beach and the recreation industry and everything that has developed since then is kind of the remnants of what was left after the government dissipated and lost most of it. That kind of being said, when you look ahead 30 years from now, one of the challenges that existed for those 2 to 5 years from 94 to 99 into 2000, and it didn't really show up in 2000's general plan. You can see it, some remnants of what happened, but between 94 and 2000, the Monterey Peninsula created a whole set of organizations, 4 being one of them, but an overall concept that we were going to do all sorts of cool things. We were going to build another recreational thing on par of Pebble Beach out of the CMEX plant. I mean, that was going to shut down and that was going to become a new big golf course and recreational community. And that was a big thing. Oh, we're going to have amusement parks. There were so many grandiose things that were out of sync with reality of what was going to happen. And I think the reason I bring this up is because I don't think we're at that point now. Not us, not any of the other communities on the peninsula, for lots of reasons. That this is a more realistic plan, but to the point that you were making, we still have to look at, okay, kind of on the periphery, what are we going to be 25 or 30 years from now? And are the water issues going to be solved? I mean, we can play around with this issue. We can say Marina Coast Water is still going to be here and they're still going to have water, and there's going to be more probably restrictions at that point on us, the Marina Coast Water. Or 30 years from now, there's going to be a desal plant in place. And if there's a desal plant in place, then they're going to be under capacity because their entire thing was always built around 50 to 60% capacity. And water restrictions aren't going to be an issue for development anywhere on the peninsula. And at that point, it could be including Marina. And it's not something we want to plan for, because that is definitely not the direction that our city council or our city has taken, is that we are ever going to support that. So we can't add that to the general plan. That this is, it's an opportunity. It is not, that's like a no action alternative. But I think at the same time, that water kind of issue and that constraint, that's got to be built into our 25 and 30-year plan. And I don't know how that gets done without compromising a series of political and city decisions. And so, I know Guido, you'll address all this. That's more of a statement than an addressing thing. My question that I have is really when I look at the vision statement, and then I kind of go down to the next one with the objective points that support it. I feel like we're conflating and kind of combining a vision with our mission statement with our then objectives to solve the mission statement. And that the vision almost becomes, it starts out strong at the very beginning, but that it then starts turning into more of the problem statement of a mission of what we're going to try to do. So when I look at the beginning of this, Marina will grow into a complete and self-sufficient city with a welcoming neighborhoods. That's not even a problem. Okay, that's the vision. I get that. The growth will be carefully balanced. I think that becomes part of the solution than a vision. To me, when I think of a vision, and I was kind of jotting this down, to me, that's what I want to inspire me as a resident or Guido as a city employee to want to be engaged in our community and not just say, I just live here. And so when I look at the vision statement, I usually think of a vision statement as something that's a little more focused and a little more direct and to the point. And that you take that high level strategic vision, you kind of then turn that into the mission statement or the goals. And then you have the goals and objectives that are underneath it that kind of that are, okay, these are the specific things we're going to solve, which is the A through P type of things. So I'm not sure what the right solution here is, except when I look at the vision statement, it just feels like it's too wordy and too all encompassing. Not that anything in it is wrong, and it all should be there someplace in this set, but it feels like we should have some type of breakout that actually say, here's the vision and here's the mission that we have. And then here are the objectives of how we're going to achieve those and what we want to do to instill that pride and that confidence in our community.
Can we go back to, there was another vision statement.
Oh, the one from the 2000 plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
So your first comment, so I would say, you know, if we could all predict what's going to happen 20 years from now, I'd probably quit and be in Vegas right now. So and be a lot richer. So part of they've changed general plan and housing laws that every year I have to file a report with the state to show them how we're updating our housing element. We're supposed to submit to the Office of Planning and Research how we're progressing on the general plan. As part of the general plan, there will be implementation measures. We're supposed to be reporting out to the state how we're meeting those goals. So the broad vision and goals will remain the same. How we get there and the prediction, I'm not in the prediction business, but we can certainly modify the implementation measures to get to the broader vision of the document. And that requires people like you being involved actively in the community, being on the commission, working with staff to implement it for the long term. And then for the second part, yeah, we've spent quite a bit of time on the vision statement. The GPAC has spent, yeah, it can certainly be improved. But the second part of your question is that tonight's meeting is really a jumping off point to get to those vision principles, right? The vision statement kind of guides us in. So it's more ping that question for a little bit because the guiding principles are coming through this process. And we have them, but they're going to be flushed out throughout the project. So if you want to, yeah.
I want to start with your second point and then go to one of your first points. So I'm hearing you say that you feel like the vision isn't visionary enough. It's not visiony enough. It's not inspirational enough. And I'm not saying that because I'm not offended. Don't worry. But it's, you know, I think we did actually have a lot of conversation with the GPAC about that, about whether it's, you know, whether the tone is correct and, you know, should this be future tense, the city will be, or whether, you know, or whether it should be like in the future, like the city is, as if we've already achieved it. And so some of that, you know, I think you're right. It is longer. We did lengthen that, and there were some comments that maybe it's a little bit too long. So, you know, I guess I would sort of ask you back if there's, you know, is there anything more specific in terms of kind of guidance or ideas that you could give about what you think more specifically we could do to improve it? And I know it's sort of hard to think about that, but if there's anything for you or for anyone else that comes to mind, you know, absolutely. And then let me just sort of talk about the water issue for 1 second. We are looking at the water issue. It is complicated here in the city. And there's always this sort of age-old question about whether a constraint like water is the tail that's wagging the dog, or whether it's actually the dog and everything else is the tail. And so I think it's just important to think about that, about we need to be realistic about what the constraints are now. But if we were always realistic about what those constraints are, we would never have a vision and we would never evolve. So there's just a balance with that, in terms of the water issue. But we're looking at, and we're going to start with the real data and the real constraints and then kind of go from there. But again, back to the vision question. I'm
Well,
really
so-
curious.
Yeah, so if you go back to the other slide, so I'm gonna reverse it because I'll answer that. The second part on the water. Mine is that the water, if the water is a risk and a constraint, it's a risk and a constraint that gets addressed in the plan.
Yep.
If the 30-year plan is about what our economic development and zoning development, and everything else could potentially look like in a realistic type of one, then I would rather see us err on the economic and growth side of it. And then say, okay, this is a risk constraint that could play into this. And that's something we're going to address down the road. I would rather remove that from the blocker perspective and turn it into a risk constraint, which is where it should be, and allow us to really focus on, okay, this is what going back to the vision, this is what our vision, this is what our problem statements, these are what our objectives are. And when we get to that point, we will get to that point when it comes up. It's a long way down the future when we get to a point where we have those issues. We have a lot of other growth and development that's already on the books in the interim that are already going to be there. This is at least 10 to 15 years down the road from a zoning development build perspective.
Yeah. And
of even having to get to that point.
I completely share that perspective. And that's how we approach it, which is we want to recognize it if it's a constraint now and call it out as a constraint, but not necessarily have that stop what we do in the plan.
And I think that was more of my concern, is that it's very easy when things are very contentious to kind of just push it off to the edge of the table and just say, we're not going to address it. And I don't want to see that happen in our general plan.
I don't think we will.
So, coming back to this, and I'll have to think about it a little bit more because I'd be honest, I have not read this. First time I've really gone through and really looked at this. What I would go down to is to me, it really stops. It goes through diverse economy. And then I could see this growth will be carefully balanced with ongoing commitment to quality of life, public health, preservation, the protection of rich history. It's like making a run-on sentence kind of alliteration thing, but it's what I would also say, you have diverse economy. And the challenge with the diverse economies, I would also say just diverse in general. Yeah. It's not just about the economy. It's one of the things that makes our community so strong is its overall diversity. Yes, the implication of everything else here is that for us to get to a diverse and an active, thriving commercial area with a vibrant college campus, we actually have to have an economy that is vibrant. And the diversity side would then play into it if we just leave it at diverse. So that would be the first one. And the second part is as a regional leader. So again, as a regional leader is visionary. We want to be a regional leader. So I totally get that. And that plays directly to what you were talking about, Guido, before, of a lot of times this community has been dictated on how we would execute our operations and how we would live in our community by outside resources and outside entities. So certainly putting a regional leader, I think I think that's a very important thing. It doesn't need to be buried halfway through it. I actually think it's up at the very top. Marina is a regional leader who will continue to grow and complete as a self-sufficient city with welcoming neighborhoods, et cetera. Because that sets the tone for anybody reading this. It's like, no, this is our community. It is not your community. We will guide it and we will be self-sufficient because we have for many times not been able and have not had that destiny to be able to make those decisions. And I think the one committee meeting that I attended, that did come up in that conversation from a lot of the other members. So I can see where they had raised this and talked about it. But then when I get to the rest of it, the actively shaped peninsula sustainability, all the rest of it, I think that moves past the vision and that becomes more the mission of what we're trying to do. So I almost take from the comma at regional leader from Marina, we'll actively through the end. And to me, that becomes more of the mission of what we're trying to do to achieve that vision. So that's kind of, if I had to break it into two, that right now at a high level is where I would break it. And that's on my like 5-minute viewing of it.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Commissioner Rana. And then Commissioner.
In the public comments, I saw some comments about the identity issue for the city. Because each city, when we go for the first time, the city's people, the roads, buildings, complexes, make a statement. When we come out of that city, we say that we went to a place, and that is what I saw it. So this identity is a very big issue, that what we should be known as, what we should say, that what is that uniqueness in the city. For this, we need to kind of engage some of the younger generation residents of city. We had a very smart gentleman other
Yes.
day here, and some of them who are living, who are going to be part of the society for many, many years to come, we should engage them, get them, and get their input as to what they would like to be known as, and that should be incorporated in the vision to start with Marina to be known as or to be identified as the city will grow. I think we start the vision statement from that, it will be more impactful.
Commissioner Hurd.
Well, in fact, I was thinking of, kind of on the same line with what Commissioner Lana has said, because in this country, each state has a nickname, like Keystone State, or even though it's not reflected in the state nickname, like Georgia is known for peach, or all these nicknames. So Marina can create that logo or catchphrase, like, I'm giving just rough example, a city of diverse American dream or something that it can advertise. If diversity is the overall theme, then we can promote that image, to differentiate. And that's one thought. Because on one hand, this diversity, that means people from all over the world, they came here and they achieved something, which means, Marina can be a reflection of American dream. Or a city of, I'm not trying to say melting pot or salad bowl, but something that reflects the population here. So that's one comment that I want to make. And Commissioner Usina has mentioned, but my question is, in terms of the vision statement, does it have to be one paragraph, or can we cut it into more than one paragraph?
It can be a sentence. It can be 3 pages.
Oh,
Can be
okay.
whatever you want it to be.
Oh,
We
okay.
tend to keep them a little bit short, but it can be multiple paragraphs. That's fine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because coming from linguistics background, when I saw it, wow, this is big, a big paragraph. So I thought people, this, depending on the length, is we can cut it into more than one paragraph. Or we can divide it into vision and then mission. There are several ways that we can approach it, but so that it will be more readable to the audience. That's another thing that came into my mind. And my next comment has to do with what Commissioner St. John and other commissioners has mentioned earlier in terms of the economy, younger generation, and the building, especially Commissioner St. John, he mentioned about this, shall I call it skyscraper that you're envisioning in Marina? But, one thing that we can think
That's
about in terms of
Roll of
economy and younger generation is not all younger generations are interested in doing the yard work. And we've all experienced during COVID that the concept of remote work, people are more acceptable to that concept, even though some companies want to pull their employees back to the office. but still, and we all know that compared to the Bay Area, is Marina housing price are cheaper. So one thing that we can think about in terms of retaining younger generation is, younger generations like to be self-sufficient, millennials, each generation has different characteristics. So, and they're more, they're more tech savvy and they like their independence. So one way that we can think about is in terms of attracting more tech younger generation from the Bay Area is, targeting, those generations that do remote work, or at least that, their job allows them to do remote work. And we can, build, for example, higher buildings with self-sufficient facilities, then that could sell off, compared to single houses that they have to be responsible for all this, requirements or city regulations. That's an idea that came to my mind.
I'm gonna jump in and feed off of the conversation, and then Commissioner Walton would be next. I have said for a very long time that we do need to consider going vertical instead of spreading out, partially because, as Commissioner Hurst stated, young buyers are not interested in yards. They're interested in outside activity. So if you go vertical, it doesn't have to be, 35 stories or even 20 stories. But if you go vertical and you have condominiums, young buyers like condominiums. They like paying the HOA, everything's taken care of. They don't have to worry about the plumbing. That's not what they're interested in, but they are interested in getting out on their bikes or hauling their, what are those? Not a canoe, kayaks out to the slough and going kayaking. They do want to take advantage of the natural environment. And I look at Cypress Knolls, and there's been a lot of conversation over the years, and it was originally supposed to be a senior community with, adult active, but also have some memory care and that kind of thing, because we are an aging community. So that's what the council was thinking about. But we have an opportunity at Cypress Knolls to combine both what the seniors need, which can be done in a multi-story building, because the moment you go multi-story, you're required to have elevators. So you can still meet your ADA requirements. Seniors will live them. They're close to transportation. They are close to shopping. When you go up, those things become readily accessible within walking distance or a very short bus ride or lift or whatever sort of transportation system you use. But you can also then free up land for open space. And this community has been very interested in maintaining as much open space as they can. So I think that needs to be expressed in how we develop, whether it's Cypress Knolls or downtown or any other, what will eventually become brownfields over the next 20 years into developable property, that we need to think how much open space can we keep by going vertically to meet our housing and commercial requirements. And if that can be expressed in this, either through our vision statement or in some other form in the general plan, I think that would be really important, because we are not planning for my generation. I'm 71. We are planning for my daughter's generation and my grandson's generation. That's who we're looking to attract to our community. And so we need to understand what they're interested in. They're interested in outdoor activity. They're also interested in bars and restaurants.
Pickleball.
Pickleball. But yeah, they're interested in both activity, that you can find walking your downtown and activity you can find when you're out at the beach, at our national monument. Those things are really important. We have direct access to the national monument. That's something that needs to be included in attracting people and keeping people when they come. They need to know what we have to offer, and it should be in the general plan.
Yeah.
So I
Thank you.
think that was all I wanted to say, and we go down to Commissioner Walton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, did I turn it off? You turn it off, Jerry. So I'm gonna kind of piggyback off of everyone and I love the idea of going vertically. I love the idea of creating a large population of I want to call us all mariners, but we don't all own boats. So, but what makes me nervous is traffic. And I want to, and I don't know if this is part of this particular general plan or another plan, but with the density that we're talking about, we should be considering widening our streets before we get to a place where we're just traffic all day, every day. I don't think that we have the ability. I understand that the desire for a 15-minute city and that kind of thing, but the reality is the jobs don't exist here that allow people like me to be able to afford to live here. I was born and raised here, born in Marina, raised in Seaside, moved back to Marina at 21 and have been here ever since. And I've never been able to get a job here in the city and stay. I have always commuted, and I'm commuting now. I think I've driven over 1,000 miles in the last couple of weeks. So, and in that commute, what I'm seeing compared to before when I used to go up to Travis Air Force Base, now that I'm going up to Woodland, around the same commute, all of the streets, everything's widened. I'm not sitting in traffic for hours. Sometimes I am, but I think you get what I'm saying is with respect to density. I think we should also consider making sure that our roadways are capable of making us still be happy. Yeah, I think I lost it there, but I think you got it.
I'm going to add on to that. It's a discussion I've had with many people recently. And as part of our becoming a leader in the region, part of being a leader is demanding, because it's terrible now, better public transportation, both commuting between our various communities, whether that's in the Monterey Bay area or up to the Bay Area. We need to have better access for people who commute, to get them off the roadways, to make commuting safer. And, but we also need it within Marina, because if we want people to live, work, and play in our community, we have to find ways to better move them around. And since I've lived here just within walking distance of my house, we've lost 4 bus stops. When I moved into my house, I thought, great, I can age in place here because I am close to bus stops where I can get anywhere. That's not the case anymore. And most of the people I know are not within walking distance of a bus stop. So rather than transportation being easier, it's become more difficult. And I think that goes back to being a regional leader. And I'm not sure how we accomplish that, but it's very important that that is in our vision statement. And that as we develop properties, that we work with TAMC and we work with MST to get what we want. Not the, oh, well, you know, you don't have enough ridership, so we're taking away more bus stops. That's what they said, rather than we're going to create bus stops in your community that better serve you. They just took them away. And that can't continue, and that should be part of this discussion is how we make that happen. How we create better interior and regional transportation. Okay, so do we want to, have we covered everything? Because we kind of bounced around a bit. Can you go back to our?
Yeah, there were a couple of questions Matt had up at the end.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
thought.
So
Yeah, let me just sort of frame up the third one. So the third one is really, we're at this point, I mean, you actually have started with Cypress Knolls to present a little bit of a vision and ideas there. We don't necessarily need those ideas this evening. They are part of the alternatives. What we really wanted to do this evening is to show you this methodology that we went through. I think for most people going through this and then ending up with those are the only areas that are, maybe for discussion because so much has already been decided. There's so many decisions that have been made. I think that for us was kind of the key takeaway. And I just want to make sure that the Planning Commission is comfortable with this as a concept. And whether you have any comments on this map, just overall, whether you think we're missing any areas that we should really look at land use changes. And again, it doesn't mean that there's not growth in other areas. There will be a lot, as we can see from from the map here or from the table here. There's a lot of units, almost 10,000 units and 5 million square feet of non-residential space that are already planned. So there's a lot that's been planned in this city for development. It's just really, when we started this, we kind of thought there was more to play with. There was more for our planning and urban design pens to start drawing on, but we really feel like that it's a little more limited to these areas. Now, that actually allows us to focus on these areas and go a little bit more in depth, which is great. So anyway, I want to just kind of frame that up to see if there are any questions or comments about this, whether there's any areas that are missing, and whether this is sort of generally acceptable to the Planning Commission.
So we have multiple commissioners.
Oh, good.
So we're going to start with Commissioner Jacobson.
Thank you,
Twice in a
Madam
row.
Chair.
Real.
As I was looking at the map and you were speaking, we were going through our conversations about going up. And the opportunity for going up is a wonderful idea. And I think it's the way most cities are gonna have to, meet their goals. But I'm coming back to but again. I don't want people building 15 and 20-story buildings down along Del Monte. And if there's any place they're gonna develop, it's most likely behind us on the hill. But there's really not a lot of opportunity there according to the map. Unless what happens is as our community ages, and I'm talking about mostly central Marina, up Carmel Hill there, there may be opportunity there to change that from single family home zoning to multiple home zoning. And maybe that's where that can happen. Because nobody's going to want, I don't want to lose my view, that kind of thing. But that seems like that would be the area that would develop that way.
you were saying the area behind where Windy Hill Park is, or where? Just so I understand.
If you just went up Carmel, yeah, Windy Hill. I mean, on the other side of Windy Hill Park, that's where
Marina
Marina
Station.
Heights is, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's up at that area, the higher part of the city.
Okay. Got it.
Seems to
Got
be
it.
the place that would happen. But
Got it.
right now we're continuing to go that way with single family.
Right.
But
Right.
Okay, so next is Commissioner St. John and then Commissioner Woodson.
Yeah, earlier in one of the previous meetings or workshops, we talked about cypress knolls, and there is in this one, the cypress knolls is, you're calling it area 2 or designation,
Yeah.
land use designation number 2. There is a green park coloration to the west of the outline for cypress knolls.
Yeah.
And I think that's been challenged as whether it's really a park or not, a designated park.
It hasn't been challenged. There is a lot of Gilia out there. So I think that's why it's more in the green. It's more, there's some constraints there that we have to be mindful of.
Is
So-
it part of the cypress and knolls?
It is.
boundary?
We own all of that.
Hmm?
The city owns all of that.
Okay, but
So
is it,
except for there's a little piece, and then, well, I guess it's shown in the blue. That's where the high school's at. But for the most part, we own all that. So
well, other than avoiding stepping on the Gilia, could that be developed into higher vertically developed, that area?
the southerly part of that green area potentially, but as you get closer to Del Monte for that green space, there's a lot of Gilia out there. So
Okay, and what about the Engine and Third Avenue or Second Avenue?
Engine and second,
Engine and Third.
Engine and third, where I can't read the things that you. I'm blind.
It's due south of Cypress Knolls.
So, where the Veterans Transition Center is, that area. Yeah. What?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's potential there. That's why it's listed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what Matt's trying to get tonight, basically, correct me if I'm wrong, is, a third of or more than a third of the city is basically already planned out. These are the areas of potential opportunity for the GPAC, the Planning Commission, the City Council to discuss. So it's more of a question of, is Matt's team on the right path, that these are the areas that we should focus on? Are there other areas that we haven't thought about? That's really the baseline for today. And then, yeah.
Okay.
Because it was kind of an interesting exercise when we actually did this as staff with Matt, and Matt's very creative. And he was like, well, what about that part? And Alice and I had to be the no people. We were like, no, that's developed. What about this? No, that's this. No, this is the, right? So to Matt's point, even though it's limiting the exercise, because there's a limited discussion, then there's the opportunity for the commission and the GPAC to go deeper into the general plan, as opposed to just very generic policy language in the general plan to say, we'll develop this parcel. You could actually go deeper about what kind of development and what level of affordability and what do you want to see there? And right, so you can have deeper language in the general plan. So there's an opportunity even in this constraint for the general plan and the planning commission.
Okay, so now we are on to Commissioner Rana, correct? Are we on to you? I think it was Commissioner Rana was next.
Well, everybody's Commissioner Jacobson tonight, so.
Okay, Commissioner Jacobson, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yes.
Start down there and come back up.
Okay.
Okay, some areas, we have these areas identified for land use for development purposes. But areas in the next to the coast, the coastal dunes, although they are not open to development, but can they be used for some kind of an economic activity like putting windmills, solar parks, which can add to the city's economy. There are a lot of big companies who are looking for land, and that will also improve the landscape of the city and generate some economic activity also. That's one question. And then I have some comments on the guiding principles, but let's have this one first.
So the answer to your question is yes. Obviously, the coastal rules are a little more limiting. So Allison's been great getting us some grants from the Coastal Commission. We just got a $500,000 Coastal Commission grant to update our local coastal program. And the local coastal program is basically the general plan for the coastal areas. So those are awesome questions, good insight. Might want to put a ping in it for now so that when we bring the LCP to the commission, and we'll have a lot of different, it's actually a 3-year process to get this done. It's almost as long as the general plan. So answer yes, but we have to balance the coastal act requirements with what we want in the coastal zone, but absolutely.
And then some comments and suggestions for,
Can we do that part after we finish the areas of discussion that they have up on the screen now? And then I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner. All right, we're gonna go with Commissioner Walton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is with respect to Preston Park, can you, with respect to potential changes, can you speak to that? And then is this the place yeah, and we'll start there and then I have a follow-up question.
In terms of what we're very blessed in Marina. We own the property.
Yes, I know.
So in terms of, it's definitely an area of potential opportunity.
Right. So have you discussed my question is there already a discussion happening with respect? So we're opening it up now and
We
we're thinking
could.
about,
Right, that's what,
A lot of this-
that's why Matt's asking the question.
because there's a lot of empty spaces out there.
Exactly.
Where a lot of housing, gardening centers, even some small retail. There's a lot that and Preston Park only has the one gas station there, it's not Ord Market anymore, but
No, but yeah,
that's the only place if you want to buy something in the middle of the night, you got to go there. And
Right.
or you got to get in your car and physically drive out and so thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly why Preston Park is on there for the reasons you stated.
Thank you.
okay. Commissioner Woodson. All right.
So I'll just start exactly where she left off. Because we have Invest expanded. I would argue that actually is parcel 1. And there's really, that's only because we called it Invest, because that was the initial tenant that we were hoping we're going to use it.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's because Invest said they were going to build this whole thing here and then they chose not to, but we've just kept the property name. But it's really, if I kind of label parcel 1, literally if you go across the street on Barando and you go into that nice big open space where Invest expanded is actually written, that's inside the boundary, because the boundary actually cuts along the river there and then cuts back almost all the way down towards East Garrison before it cuts back over. Doesn't go all the way down to where East Garrison is. And then it cuts back to the road and then it follows the road back over and along the CSUMB boundary and then it cuts in. So my point is that there is actually an intersection. At one point in a very old plan, general plan for the military, they actually looked at developing that area in there. And it just went nowhere because eventually in 91, BRAC came out and it was like, there was nothing. But there is that whole open area space there that is also, I believe, owned by the city. I think. I'm not sure.
Are you talking at the airport or? at
No, I'm
the
talking,
Invest Expand?
where the words Invest expanded are.
That's
Yeah.
what I meant.
So on the,
It's outside of
doesn't
the
belong to the
sphere of
city.
influence. It's C.
no, yeah,
City, that's county.
It's
okay,
area
so it's
C.
county.
Yeah, it's area C on this map, right?
Right.
It's
Yep.
it's outside of the sphere of influence. So it would require a sphere of influence boundary, which can happen.
Which, so I guess my point is, I'm going to start here, is that we have that area also. That's an area that I would take as a more viable area than East Garrison, quite frankly, because it's number one, it's contiguous to our property boundaries of the city. And number two, it's an open area that already is closer to tie-ins to utility systems. Number three, it's in a key intersection area right now, and it's going to stay a key intersection for development, for cut-throughs to Salinas. That's not going to change. I mean, they're not even planning to start building on the 68 expansion now until 2027 at the earliest. So you're looking at years. So to me, that's the first area, is that I think that there's the potential that we would look at that as a sphere of influence area. The second, kind of looking at the map, and this goes back to Commissioner Walton's concerns on transportation. It's one of mine for years now, is the entire Second Avenue corridor. We necked it down. I get what CSUMB did, but that CSUMB parking lot area, their concept of building up and putting 2,800 students in a mixed use development, that when they came and briefed that 6 months ago, when they briefed that to us, and that's the second iteration of a plan that I've seen for that area. They've always had some type of residence hall mixed use development in there, but that's the second formal development plan that I've seen formally from the campus. That is going to cause challenges for our community in a lot of ways. And CSUMB's response to it at the time was, they're college students, they don't drive. Okay. Nice. That's a risk that they're making at our expense. And the reason that I raise that is that, number one, I think the CSUMB parking lots, my question is, first off, isn't that part of CSUMB? So wouldn't that be a sphere of influence and not a development area? Because we don't have control over that.
I mean, it is owned by the campus, depending on if it's faculty or academic type space, or if it's just purely market rate. There's different local zoning rules that apply. I think Matt's showing it on the map as a potential area of discussion to get comments from the commission and the GPAC, because no matter what the campus proposes, there are impacts to our Marina community, and we have every right to work with the campus to say, hey, whatever you build there, we want to be a part of the process. We want to make it, whatever the community wants. And then if you put it in the general plan, that's the legal nexus by which staff could then go to the campus and say, hey, we know you own it and you can do a lot that you want, but you have to make the general plan conformance findings, right? So that's why Matt's showing it on the area.
So I
of
completely
discussion.
agree with showing it in there. I completely agree that it needs attention because of the impacts that it can have and will likely have, because at some point they will expand and they will do this. They just have to figure out when and the timing and development wise. My point is more that if I look at what we can control and what we can't control, a sphere of influence is something that we have less control over. So parcel C belongs to the county. East Garrison is county. We don't have control over those areas. We don't have control over CSUMB parking lots. And to me, that becomes then for a sphere of influence, because it is an outside partner that we are going to have to create a relationship with and come to a consensus on to be able to control that development, however it is, to meet our needs while still meeting whatever needs that they have, whether in this case, CSUMB versus the county. And I say this in deference that I appreciate that CSUMB is here. At the same time, CSUMB has a set process that is about their campus and about the CSU system. It is not about the city necessarily. And as long as they are congruent goals, they will support this and our development. If they are not in parallel, they will prioritize theirs over ours.
Absolutely.
And so I think that by listing them as just a zone that's an area of discussion and not putting them as a sphere of influence, we are diminishing the risk to our community.
Could I jump in quickly? Because
Sure.
there's a couple technical terms being thrown around. So sphere of
Sure.
influence is actually a boundary that is approved by an agency called LAFCO. And it essentially is the boundary that is the area, as I mentioned previously, the city could grow into. So sphere of influence areas are outside of the city limits and in the county, but they are areas that the county could grow into. This parking lot, I hear your point, but again, I just want to clarify terms. This parking lot is owned by CSUMB, but it is already physically located within the city. And CSUMB as a state agency essentially has authority to do what they want, so long as it is for their operations. If they start developing for other purposes, such as a private residential development, it gets kicked to the city regulations. And so because they came in with this idea, or there's this concept of doing something that may not be directly for the school, then it gets kicked into the city regulations. And so that's why, that's the concept of having it. They are absolutely a partner that needs to be talked to. If they are building for the school and they're building dorms, then there's not a lot the city can do. If they come in and they try building market rate housing, then there is something the city can do.
Well, and their support and their plan is undergraduate upper class housing and mixed use development in classrooms. So it absolutely will meet the definition of academics and residential halls. My point is that they can build that. We cannot stop it, really. But at the same time, we really need to make sure from a general plan perspective that we understand that there are significant risks entailed by having a partner in CSUMB sitting next to us. And it's CSUMB here as a state agency. It could have been the federal government that owned all this land, and it would have been the same. It could have been the same issues. That's my only point, is that we need to
Right,
highlight that.
and I was only pointing out that campus, no campus, market rate, not, Matt's putting it on the map to get this kind of, so this is actually what we're trying to get, right? But then also, it's still within the heart of Marina. And if there are impacts to Marina residents, to our roads and infrastructure, we have every right to comment, work, collaborate with the campus. So that's why it's here. We want this feedback. Thank you. And then we want stuff in the general plan to give us teeth to push back on the campus. Because when I started it 2 years ago, about 6 months into starting, they didn't want to put in dorms. They wanted to basically do a full market rate development with not even student housing. They told us it was going to be a preference for students. It wasn't even 20% would go to students. And so we politely pushed back and said, well, then you have to go through our process. And they pushed back, and we had several discussions. But anyways, bringing that all up to say, it'll probably come back during this general plan. We want teeth in the general plan to give the commission and council the legal nexus to be able to shape the development, even if it ends up becoming whatever it ends up
And
becoming.
I think that's
right?
my
So,
concern.
yeah.
Is that we as a city need to have the teeth so that when you go into these discussions, you have more of a foundational basis that you can, here is the updated plan.
Exactly.
This is where we want to go. And this is how
Exactly.
we want to do
And
that.
that's why it's here.
Right.
That's why it's
So
here.
the last area that kind of go into, and this goes back to keeping our community in our community. And it's one of it's one of the most depressing parts of living on the peninsula, is that I go into Salinas and I go to Watsonville and I go up to Gilroy, and all of those communities have really good developed parks and recreation. Now, our new subdivisions have them, but our main city still is lacking in this. And I know that, and I've raised this before, that again, part of the Parks and Recreation Strategic Plan, I really feel like should be an appendix to this. And I know and now that we have a new parks director, that will help. And she's already working towards getting that done, because I've talked to her about it. But when I look at the development and I go back up to the CMEX area, so the northern area of Marina on the north end, all the green on the coast there, that from a parks and development perspective, and I know this is part of it, can we on the general plan side say, okay, in alignment with our parks and recreation, can we develop a city regional park that really emphasizes that and focuses on, again, this may be more of a conversation for the parks plan as she's developing it. But here, from our perspective, is can we ensure that we are looking at things like that, especially when you start looking at this, which is going to come before us next month. When we discuss the coastal hazards and sea level rise, that plays very directly to the 3 and 5 foot rise issues, because if we have that as a undeveloped wetland or parks area, then it actually gives us growth while at the same time staying within the constraints of some of the hazards and the risks that come if there is a 3 to 5 foot sea level rise, because that's going to impact the edge of that area directly, and we're never going to be able to redevelop it.
Yes. Open space is a part of the general plan. And parks and beautifying the city, all that stuff can be put in the general plan.
Okay.
So
That's it.
now in terms of implementing it, the general plan would just have policy language that says the city will work towards, a regional, park of regional significance. But in terms of implementing it, then obviously
Well, it's
it's
different.
some type
It's a
of,
different thing, but to me, that
right,
the concept of, and this goes back to the general plan is about our city. But if we want to be a beacon for the community and for the region, one of the weaknesses in our region along the coastal side of Monterey County, of Monterey Peninsula, is its park system, is outside of Garland Ranch and Point Lobos. And Point Lobos is just its own separate kind of state issue at state level, right? Outside of that, there's Jack's Peak and there is Garland. And Garland's really the only one. Other than that, there's really nothing on the county side that exists. So I think there's an opportunity here to create something else that is going back to this is a draw, and laying that out in the general plan, that we are not just looking at the city, that there are some things that we do in the general plan that are about the wider community as a whole. This is one of those areas that we could use as a draw into the general plan, that leveraging our open space to create cultural and economic development.
yeah, I would point out for the commission that Lane's been working really hard to get that swimming and recreation center within the dunes. And we've been told by a couple economists that if we can get that off the ground, which is a $28 million lift, that will be a regional draw in terms of, we have the bones of the building, but obviously we need to put some love and care into it, but that will be a regional draw. So, yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Rana.
Hey, I have some brief comments about the guiding principles. One is that the language used, it's too cryptic and just rather vague. If we can put some concrete action elements, say, for example, housing opportunity for all, how are we going to do that? Strong and diversified economy. I mean, what all we have in mind and what actions we want to take. Resilient city, a city prepared for resilient against natural disasters. So what actions are we going to take?
Yeah, and so, so basically, I mean, the overview is, you have the mission statement, right? And then you have the guiding principles, and then we'll go deeper and deeper by creating the chapters of the general plan, and within the chapters, there'll be very specific policy language. And those words have a lot of meaning because those documents outlive my employment here. And if it says, to Commissioner Woodson's point, the city shall work towards a regional open space that will be an attractive economic development draw. That's our guiding vision. And then we take that as staff, and then now we move into the implementation phase, which is some type of park master plan or a feasibility study, or right. So that's kind of the order. It's we start with the very general plan, and then we get to the guiding principles, and then we have the chapters, and then we have the policy, and then at the end we have the action items. And I forget what it's called in the general plan, the implementation chapter. And if you'll see the implementation chapter has year by year. And that's what we report out to the state of how we're, so that's the answer to your question. This is generic purposely. So,
Yeah, but
Just like
still,
all objectives and then implementations.
yeah, I agree with that, but if someone wants to get an overview as to what we are trying to achieve, should be able to have something minimum as to this is how it is going to come up. And another mistake in the resilient city, you talked about the wildfires, flooding, earthquakes. You can add drought if, I mean. that's not a
absolutely. That could
possibility.
definitely be added. Yes, absolutely. You're right. We just came out of a drought.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so let me just use that one as an example. So there is I'm drawing a blank, the chapter, no, the safety element will have very specific maps of the flood zones and, in other communities, a high risk fire area, right? So we're gonna take that very generic statement, make it a resilient community. And then with those very detailed maps, we would create policies to say, in some communities, well, we don't want to build a lot in the flood zone, or if we build in the fire zone, why did it go blank?
So that's where something like this, the coastal hazard and sea level rise plan.
Yeah, so that's a perfect example that coastal plan is, I think it's like 300 pages we gave you guys. Right? But that all starts with this very generic language and then it gets to be specific. So
I don't see any other lights, but I would like to make one comment. Commissioner Herr early on talked about the importance of having that statement that really defines who we are.
right.
I thought about this when I was on planning commission in 2005. So it's been something that I have felt was really important. And I will tell you what I thought of back then, and it could certainly be fine tuned because we've certainly changed a lot since 2005. But I called us a coastal enclave whose restaurants, shops, and other businesses are a reflection of our diversity.
Yeah, that's cool.
So
Very
think
nice.
about it,
Yeah. That's
throw
very
it out for
accurate.
discussion.
No.
Maybe we could do a community survey, what catchphrase.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, that would be, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be, yeah.
I'm sure you'll get a lot of things that show that same kind of thing. We're on the coast, which we take pride in, and we take huge pride in our diversity. And I'm sure we also think a lot about what we find attractive, not necessarily what someone else would first think of, but it is what we first think of.
We are the key holders.
Yeah, so I'm a San Jose resident. So for my part of San Jose, they actually had a focus group and you had to put a word up on a board or you had to put a statement. And then that got all cobbled together for my district in San Jose. So yeah. Where I live in San Jose, it's a very bedroom community. Santa Clara County is unique. Most of the San Jose residents leave San Jose to go to work. So it was very much about like people when they come back to the neighborhood having open space and parks and having it safe. So yeah, I don't recall. It wasn't very memorable. But anyways, but we can have a yeah, we can definitely do a word choice type of exercise.
Other softwares, what are the most?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's good. No, yeah. Actually, as a matter of fact, I got contacted by a Stanford MBA student who's doing his capstone project on using AI for local government. So maybe that's something I can reach out to him. Yeah, that would be good. Yeah.
Maybe they can clean up all of this.
So, yeah. Okay.
Narrow
So.
it down.
Yes,
it
We put this in, I will tell you,
ChatGPT is
we
garbage.
put
in,
earlier
there we go.
versions in ChatGPT
Did
and yeah, and it just wasn't that good. Maybe we asked the wrong question. Again, you have to keep refining. We kept refining and we're like, not good
No.
enough. Just, it doesn't reflect.
It has to reflect.
No, we use it. Trust me. I can't wait.
Well, oh, there is another light on. I gave him the opportunity, Commissioner St. John.
Yes, I wanted to, one of the things that intrigues me is the city's rich military history. And this
Mhm.
is taking words out of our vision statement. And what I can't get my arms around is where we find that rich military history, where we can go and see it.
Mm.
Oh, you know where we can see it?
Since we were stationed here for 6 years prior to it closing.
Yeah,
Much of it is gone, and I agree, much of it is gone. However, if you walk, I believe it's along 9th, it might be along 10th. You will see next to the Young Nat Church, a small chapel. And that chapel is one of the first chapels to be built on Fort Ord. Our Marina Equestrian Center was originally a animal hospital.
Hmm.
And we had military horses here.
Mhm.
And that when we first started, and so that, in fact, that has a historic designation. One of our community members fought for many years to historical designation. It's not through the federal government, but it is through the state. Couldn't be done through the federal government because those buildings were standardized buildings. Any post you went to anywhere around the United States, they were all built exactly the same way. But it is one of the very, in fact, it is the only veterinary hospital, large animal veterinary hospital that still exists. So that is part of our military history. What is now I think it's Goodwill owns it, along 3rd was the original Red Cross building. And the VTC was the original base headquarters. Yes.
You've also got the discount. So what we want to put the R on plan, that is the old discount
Right.
facility.
So for the commission,
Yeah.
so these are all
Yeah.
awesome historical points. And from the mission statement you've looked at, this commission and the GPAC can add policies to the general plan to work with the city staff to create a public art policy, to have, historic reference points. In San Jose where I live, there's all of these, even if they're not on the state or federal registry, if you walk around downtown San Jose, there's all these plaques that give you the history of different buildings. So
Yeah.
all of this stuff can absolutely be added to
We
the
have it
general plan.
downtown Monterey has it with all the
Right.
Adobes.
And there's one more company street that exists.
There is one left.
There is one left, owned by the city of Marina. And I know that at one point, the city manager was trying to figure out how to turn that into, like a place where you could go and walk through and,
So,
and revive
but
it.
I think maybe if I
yeah.
summarize this all back up, and I was looking at, okay, this goes back to implementation versus policy, but the policy, this is a partnership issue. So right now you have 3 entities that own Fort Ord, the main cantonment area of Fort Ord. That is Seaside, that is CSUMB, and that is Marina. And at if from a partnership perspective, there are only 2 or 3 dozen, areas, places that are left that have significance that you can look at and say this was part of it. But on CSUMB, there's still a lot. The old power plant areas that were part of public works are now part of the art and industry facilities right across from the student center. So if we went back, this is again, implementation, promote the historic value of the legacy of the military. We have some here, but that's more of a regional issue. So again, we'd go back to how do we partner in the general plan to emphasize that with our partners, CSUMB and with Seaside, because the three of us all have there could be a vested interest of, from implementation perspective,
Exactly.
of how could we create a tour of all the military objectives that are still left in this community. I mean, that, and I can tell you the easy way to suck in CSUMB on this one, from an implementation perspective, is to tie into like their graphic arts or one of their departments for their capstones, and ask and see if they have students who would create a
Right.
virtual tour.
Right.
And again, we're digging into the weeds, but I think that this idea of the military side is a very valid point. It's
Right.
something that I'm very dismayed about, because I have watched CSUMB, just as part of their development, take away
Take
more and
away.
more of the legacy. The thing that drives me nuts is that when I drive through the main area of CSUMB, they got rid of one of the very first pieces of art they ever installed on that campus, which was the whole mural that was a legacy of education, military transitioning to education. And they pulled those out, and they've never answered on what they did with them. Did they just tear them down? Did they put them in storage? Are they going to put them up anywhere? Nobody knows.
I don't know.
And it's those types of things that really provided, I mean, that was one of the very first things that was done by the campus to kind of welcome, okay, hey, we know where we came from, and now they just eliminated it.
Right.
So
So-
something else that maybe needs to be in the general plan is, when I was on the council, I wanted very much to preserve our military history. And we were doing the Trail and Greenway. And it was being approved, and I said, the only way I would support it is if we found a way to make that trail more than a trail. And my suggestion, and it was approved by the council unanimously, was to make it a Veterans Memorial Trail. And you could start it at the beach where Stillwell Hall once existed, and you can walk all the way out to the Equestrian Center and see these various places along the way that tell the story, a bit of the story of our military history. Then you can also go to Facebook pages where people who were stationed here share their stories.
Right.
And we could have that put into an app so people could start at the beach and walk to the Equestrian Center and hear letters written home, funny stories from soldiers that may not have survived because this was a training ground for going to Vietnam. So it
Yeah.
has a really strong history.
Or you could tie it to some of the things that are in modern businesses, like the bar.
At the general,
Well, that is it.
At the general.
Okay. They were included on the note.
Right. It's not the officers club.
So
was-
in the interest of time,
Yes.
so I have an hour commute home. So Matt and I hear you loud and clear. We
Yes.
want to use the military rich history potentially as a way to bring people together, bring people to Marina, and potentially as an economic development tool. I completely hear that loud and clear. And I think it's a great idea. We can totally flesh that out with the GPAC and bring something back to the planning commission. But these are all the great ideas that, to Commissioner Rana's point, hey, why is this so generic? Well, it's so generic because eventually it's going to be something a little bit more concrete, but we want to have the broader, higher order discussion first.
I wouldn't
so.
have gone into any of
So.
this except somebody asked, what military?
Oh, no, it's fine, it's fine, it's just fine. Just trying to keep you guys on track, so.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It shows how important it is.
Yes.
Very diversified planning commission. We all kind of kick around with this because we all see the of that, of the history.
And just to piggyback on that, I think one of the reasons why Marina specifically is as diverse as it is because Fort Ord was one of the only, and I believe one of the first integrated base in the United States, which is why I exist, because
Yeah.
both of my lineage comes from Samoa and descendants of chattel slavery. So none of my people could serve anywhere else. So they landed here.
They landed here.
And then my parents met because they went to high school here and had a band and all the other crazy stuff. So I think that that's a very important thing to add is with respect to the historical part of this nation and integration and how Marina became as diverse as it is specifically with respect to Puerto Rico.
Yeah,
Awesome.
think of it that you really contributed a lot nationwide in terms of promoting diversity.
Yes.
And we should have a Fort Ord Park or a Fort Ord Memorial or something that.
That's what the trail was for, the
Yeah.
Veterans Memorial Trail, and it is
Yeah,
approved, so
and-
it should be,
So
Yeah.
it should
be recognized
finally
in
go
some
to
way.
this
Yeah.
visitor center of
Yeah.
Fort Ord or something that.
Okay.
Yeah,
so as
Commissioner
we-
Amadeo, if there's some stuff from the council that you'd be able to share that we can add to the, Matt's team's compiling a lot of source documents. We would love to get a look at that. So,
There is a PowerPoint that would be in the council minutes.
okay, well, we can talk offline.
Okay.
So,
Great. Offline or right now?
so just wrapping up. So, as we have on the screen, so Matt and I will be attending the GPAC on December 7th. That's a virtual meeting, I believe. And then December 19th, we're going to basically be giving the same shtick to the council December 19th. And then we will be coming back to this body, probably with more meaty, I guess, some of the draft policies, Matt, or, I mean, alternative. So, I mean, so Allison and I specifically wrote the proposal, which Matt's following in the contract to have a lot of check-ins with the planning commission and council. So you'll have multiple bites at the apple, to the point where at the end of it, you'll probably be sick of seeing us. But the goal is we don't want the commission and council to be surprised. We want you to be involved in the whole process. So that's where we are today. We appreciate all the feedback we've gotten. And Matt, I don't know if you wanted to,
Thank you, Matt. We really do appreciate all the work that's gone into this and for you being patient with us. It's very exciting. And we're glad we got this early look at it. Guido, you wanted to know about December date?
yeah, so real quick. So November 30th, a very, very important meeting for the planning commission. We are looking at the draft housing element. If you cannot be at that meeting, please tell me. I know Commissioner Herr is going to be in Korea. That's fine. But if any other commissioners cannot make that meeting, I really need you to tell me. December 15th is the deadline to get the housing element to the state. If hopefully we can get a favorable recommendation from the commission November 30th, and then December 5th from council, I'll be able to meet that state deadline. So that's really important. And then our meeting after November 30th is December 14th. And then we have 2 or 3 really meaty items potentially for December 14th. So I kind of needed to hear from the commission. Do you want to have one super long December 14th meeting or December 14th and December 21st? So it's either 1 4-hour meeting or 2 2-hour meetings or however that shakes out, but kind of needed to hear from the commission.
Commissioners,
So
2 hours. Okay, so you would prefer a 4-hour then.
Could we start a half an hour earlier or something like that?
sure. I'm here anyways. I'm here at 8 o'clock. I'm here all day, so we can start as early as you guys want. So
Okay, so
sure. Why not?
Commissioner Jacobson would rather have 2 meetings. Is that what I heard? Yes,
Yeah,
Commissioner Herr.
only because of my attention span.
Commissioner Herr.
She's not here. She's in Korea.
Oh, that's. oh,
Yeah,
for
she's
those
after
meetings.
November 30th on. She's in Korea
Oh,
for.
okay, so she won't be.
So
free.
no.
Okay,
So
and Commissioner St. John.
Yeah, I can have a longer meeting or two, I'm flexible.
Okay, so did,
Question, can we? So if we went earlier. If we started at 5, went to 7, do we take a break for
dinner?
for 15 or 20 minutes?
Absolutely.
Come back for the second session so that we could actually.
Sure. Sure, and I could, if the commission wants to do that and that's the will of the body, we could definitely order some food because it will be a longer meeting. So but I don't know if people can commit. I know Commissioner Walton commutes. I don't know if 5 o'clock's even doable for you, Commissioner Walton, or,
The 14th.
yeah. We can, so just the context for, separate from the housing element, which we need to have that special meeting. And the reason why we're having that special meeting is our next regular meeting would be on Thanksgiving, which obviously we're not having, right? Barring that, by the Brown Act, by the Brown Act, as long as I post the agenda and I give public the times that we're meeting, I mean, we could basically have it at any time, right? But we just have to tell the public within 72 hours prior.
Do we call it a special meeting when it's not at our regular time?
Generally you would call it a special
Special.
meeting, yeah.
So Commissioner Walton.
So I believe I'm available as of this moment, and I'm on that schedule where, you have to pivot, you have to pivot. So I have one meeting, it ends at noon. And I believe I can take that remotely, so I'll be here, but the very next day I have to be in Modesto at somewhere between 8 and 10, depending.
Oh,
So-
wow. So it needs to end early for you.
It, for me, so that I can drive safe, yes.
So a question. In some types of meetings, as long as you have a quorum to start the meeting and if everybody participates, someone can leave early and you're still considered to have had a quorum. Does that work with,
I mean, as long as we have quorum
to start?
to start, the only hiccup is if somebody shows up late and they didn't get all the full testimony. So we want the commissioners who are gonna vote on an item to hear the full presentation and testimony,
She's just talking about she might have to leave early because she has to go to Modesto the next morning.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we could start at 5, we could take a break at 7, we can grab we can have food ready. Take a 20-minute break, go from 7:30 to 9 and end up at 9
Does that
o'clock.
work?
If that works, then I can,
So it looks like we're gonna do 5 o'clock
December 14th.
on the 14th.
So we'll say 5 to 7, 7 to 7:20 break, and then we'll do a 7:30 till 9. Okay. Great. That's all I have.
Putting it in our calendar.
Yeah, no, I'll send out an invite to the commission and wish you guys all a happy Thanksgiving if I don't talk to you guys before then, and wish Commissioner Her safe passage to Korea, and we'll see you after the first of the year.
Okay. I'm going to adjourn this meeting.